Okay, let's check the video, the sound. Give me a moment for everybody. Just getting started. And hello. Hi. I can't see you. I just see an empty chair. Okay. So,
Okay, we on?
not yet. Just give me a moment. Is that
Well,
Tom?
no, take your time.
Just be a minute.
Well, don't hurry.
It's not working. Okay. So, I've just got to turn down my, stop the feedback from my voice. But okay, let's see what happens on that. Um, let me check this. Hello? Hello? Doesn't work. Hello?
Well, you can get me, right?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm gonna get I think I'm getting the feedback too much. But we'll see what happens. I just gotta not talk too much. Okay, so how are you doing, Tom? And we got somebody else, Tristan Murphy.
Well, I'm doing, yeah. It's like everybody else watching the TV and see what's going to get screwed up next.
Oh yeah, what do you think is the biggest screw up that's going on now? Iran, right? Something in Iran.
Well, if yeah, it's yeah, Iran's going to queer the deal. Yeah.
Okay, Tristan and Jim. Hi, Jim. So Jim's here too. Hey, Jim, I'm going to make you a co-host. Okay.
Okay, sure. How you doing, Tom?
Hi.
How you doing, Tristan?
Hey Jim, I'm good, thanks. Just in the middle of my final exams of my degree.
Oh, you're getting your master's or BA?
Now my BA.
Oh, okay. Oh, and Jillian's breaking your balls?
Yep, yeah, yeah, Dr. Schofield's hitting us hard for sure.
What you don't know is that Tristan is like 6'6", and
Oh, so he can break your balls. Okay, good.
he's wide as, I mean, this guy, he had to go sideways to get through a doorway.
Oh,
I don't know. I don't understand how those giant fingers are able to do airplane repair with all those delicate little pieces.
hmm.
It's actually very difficult. We have a certain special receiver in the F-18s that We apply only when they're going sort of on operations. That it takes a couple hours to do a remove install on them. The record is 45 minutes.
Good,
Ah,
good God. Well, when I make little airplane models, or when I used to, I'm always the guy who has a completely fogged up, gluey window. I have like no coordination at all. So um, that's your job, Tristan.
well, I have sort of interesting news. Um, I met today with a person who teaches at the University of Florence, who was slated to replace Paul Kenny at Yale.
Oh.
And I don't know where it's at with Patrick, but he came in on a 2 to 3 day visit to the United States from Italy to give a presentation at a seminar on international history at Columbia. Now, Adam was there, and Adam and I had a long conversation. And, I didn't realize that he nearly died last year, he told me. He had an aneurysm, he had a serious heart problem. Um, but as we were leaving, Adam said, "Well, Jim, what have you been doing?" So we started to talk about the podcast stuff. And I said, "Look, I know you're busy, but it'd be great to get you on once in a while, Adam." And so Patrick's going to work on Adam, and maybe we'll get Adam on in the next week or two, which would be, like, because Adam's a lot of fun, and he's also brilliant as hell. And he also is a war gamer, Julian. I didn't know. I don't know that. He was a big squad leader freak.
I
So
gotta tell you, there's a lot to learn there.
anyway, and Adam just finished a book on climate change, which is going to come out in the UK. But Patrick was going to teach at I didn't know the Bundestag had a war college PhD program in Hamburg.
Oh,
And so he was going to do some kind of program up there with the Bundeswehr. And I don't know what happened. The whole thing fell apart. He got into academic bureaucratic politics, which academics, of course, are brilliant at. And so that got fucked up. But he is he wants to do podcasts with us, and that should be a lot of fun because Patrick will be quite interesting. He did this huge book that Cambridge published on the. It's a 2 volume work he's doing. You think he's going to do 3 volumes on the Atlantic Order, starting from the American Civil War. And the first book is a huge fucking book. I mean, I got it like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I got sick. It was 1,000 pages, so I couldn't really. I said, hey, I don't really. To read 1,000 pages would take me about 2 weeks. And but anyway, Adam, of course, would be quite interesting to have, and we get a lot of people coming to want to listen to Adam.
yeah, I would definitely agree. All right, I want to share this here. This is my keychain lanyard from what I think you're describing is the Fudungs Academy. It was the staff college that was not shut down when at the end of World War I, the Germans were obliged to get rid of their staff system. This place survived, and it's in Hamburg. And I went there to do basically a bunch of presentations with the Germans. The building itself was, of course, annihilated. And it's about 10 kilometers away from from the red light district where the Beatles learned how to play. And so it's a new, modern, ugly set of buildings on a base. But yeah, it's there. And this is probably my longest lasting lanyard for my keys I've ever had. It's like 20 plus years old now.
And it's a German lanyard.
Yeah, it's the place is the Fudungs Academy, and it's all like Moltke and Schlieffen and all their famous generals on the walls. But it's basically a modern military base. It's on the river, the Elbe, and it's on the north shore, right near the waterfront.
That must be the place.
Yeah,
ugly
as hell, but lots of history.
He was going to run some kind of program there with a colleague at Po in Paris, And the whole, I don't know what the whole thing fucked up. We didn't have time to talk about that because he basically gave his presentation. He's going down to Washington to see his sister and back to Florence. But I figure I told him, oh, we'll do something with you next week, man, when he gets back to Italy.
Jim, you and some of the people here should go to the Hack.
What the fuck's that?
Chris Lawrence's annual conference. The people there are just, I mean, they're it's the densest military type who's who that you could sort of access easily.
Really?
Yeah, I mean it's a blast. It's your typical half war gamer, half ex-US military intelligence type. It's the funnest conference I've ever been to in my life.
Really?
Far away. Yeah, it's like three. Well, this year they're gonna have 4 simultaneous.
I'll tell you, Julian, you can't beat being 10 feet away from the Grateful Dead high on acid. Let's put it.
Okay,
That beats that, baby.
No, I you know what? Emotionally, I'm sure it does. But
Yeah.
the building where they do the conference is 4,000 meters from CIA.
Oh,
So
really? Oh,
like
Langley. That's it.
yeah, well, it's in Tyson's corner.
Oh, yeah.
And it's yeah, I mean it's just cool, crazy, fun people. And when we were there last year, Chris let me organize. It was three days of presentations, and we had 3 war game nights. We did Birds of Prey, then we did OSW, and then we did what do you call it? Harpoon with Larry Bond. Larry Bond showed up, and he ran a Cold War ship to ship fight, which was just, epic.
You got your jollies off.
Yeah, I mean, I say, I thought I've been inspired, and so I'm writing. I'm preparing a course for January 2027, 12 weeks long, and the course is playing Harpoon. I've never done something like this before. It could be a total disaster, but over the summer I'm going to write the videos, do the lectures, and the students have to hypothesis test.
Yeah.
Basically, scenarios involving the Canadian Navy. Canada escorting ships to Okinawa, Canada chasing Russian subs in the Arctic, Canada chasing Chinese subs in mid-Pacific, China helping the Australians, that sort of thing.
You should get in touch with Saban down in Chile, where he retired to. Phil, and talk to him about, because I couldn't believe he had that hustle where people were getting master's degrees and doing war game. It just like blew my mind. I said, how'd you get away with this, man? I mean, it was just like too much.
Well, we shared students. I had about 10 of my students from Concordia going to King's College. They took his class.
Oh, yeah.
It's fun. I don't quite do what he does. I prefer. I mean, I like what he does. I wish I had taken his class, but I'm deep into the QJM Dupuis type stuff. It's just
Yeah, well, I have my my qualms with that stuff, but I can dig it on one level, but
I'd love to hear your criticism.
I'm a big if you're going to do combat results stuff, you've got to base it on actual combat, and sometimes Dupuis. Well, anyway, that Dupuis got savaged when they argued about all that shit. So, Chris, you're in the hospital, man. I hope you're feeling better, man. Can you talk, man?
Yeah, I'm much better now. Yeah,
Oh yeah, I've been
better now.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Unfortunately, I've had to be in the hospital. I've had to go see people in the ICU in the hospital. It's been quite an experience. ERs are like going into like a Monty Python movie.
Yeah, I got lucky in that I was on my way to my best friend from college's house in Charlotte, who's a very well-known doctor in Charlotte. And so when I was taken to the hospital, I was taken to a hospital where everybody knows him. And the person who performed the procedure to take the clot out of my head is somebody that is a friend of his.
Wow. You got a pulmonary embolism?
I had a stroke.
Oh, fuck, man. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah. Yeah, this person had a stroke also, so I've been watching the consequences of that for the past 2 weeks. Well, get better, man. Get better.
Yeah, I think they basically said that people don't normally speak as well as I do this soon after having one. So I guess I lucked out.
I think we all have to go jog.
Well, that's the whole thing with Adam. I said Adam when Adam gotten overweight, and he always was pretty fit. And I said, shit. He said, Jim, I had open heart surgery last year, and I nearly died. I said, no shit, man. Oh man. So, but that'd be fun to get Adam on because that would bring in holy shit. That'd bring in 50, 60,000 people easily with Adam. Anyway, all right, Kenny, what do you want to talk about tonight, man?
Well, the first thing is mostly you should run it because I'm not sure about the back feed on my microphone. Is it okay? You're not
Yeah,
hearing
all
an
right.
echo?
I can hear you. I don't hear an
Okay.
echo.
Well, just to clear up two things right away. Julian, okay, what's the name of that conference you're advocating?
Hack. I'll put it in the link. It's uh,
Just spell it out because there's other people watching that don't see the chat. What?
oh right. Say that let me pull it up so I can read the precise terms for it. Obviously, I'm a big fan of it because my students are able to get mentorship down there, which is unheard of, and it's a convergence of military practitioners, those in the think tank community, and published authors who come down there to present their books. Some of those are academics, and one is we have a Colonel Matter who wrote an excellent book on how to stop bomb manufacturing in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he's a Delta Force colonel with an
Okay.
insane past.
So what's
Uh,
the name of the conference, though?
a hack. Let me just pull it up here, okay? So I can read it out. Here we go.
You can
It's
share
the
it. You can share it. I don't know if you know how to do that, but okay.
Yep, I will share it right away, and you guys can those that have access to the link, and then I'll explain it very briefly. So here is the link that I just put on the side, so you could actually call it up and read it. But we're looking at the historical analysis annual conference. It's a 3-day affair in it says Vienna, Virginia, but it's basically Tyson's Corner. It's for me just a shocking intersection of wargamers, practitioners, academics, and military types over 3 days. It's exactly what I'm interested in.
Well, how's the food?
Well, the food is you go down to a restaurant outside, which is actually also really good.
Okay.
Tyson's Corner is obviously a satellite of the U.S. government, and so it's boring as hell. It's like Emerald City, but it's the people there are shocking.
Okay, that's good enough. So people can find out about it by you giving us the information, right?
Yeah,
And then we'll say,
HAAC, and it's run by the Dupuy Institute. Strongly recommended for wargamer types.
okay, great. And then Jim, well, I know you know who Adam is, and maybe everybody else here does, but for us who don't know, what's his name? Adam.
Adam Choose. Adam is a
How did you spell his last name?
Tooze,
Okay, Toos.
and he is a tenured professor at Columbia University. He's a Brit. He's written a whole bunch of books on basically political economy. He's an economic historian, but he's much broader than that. So he just finished a book on the politics of global climate change, which is going to be published in a few months in the UK. But he did a book on his dissertation at Cambridge was on the economy of the Third Reich. And a couple of people, I'm sure Julian knows the book. It's a really, it's a big, thick book looking at Hitler's economy. And then he did a book on the pre-war economy, Deluge, which deals with the rise of American economic power. And then he did a good book. He did a very good book on the pandemic. But he sort of emerged as a prominent public intellectual in the past, I'd say, 6 or 7 years. And he started a Substack, which has about 200,000 people. And, he's all over the place. He does a couple of podcasts. He does two in German. I didn't realize. He told me he did two in German. And he's a really interesting. I'd never seen a historian who knew how to integrate military history in a political economic class. He does a big. Colonius had a whole bunch of people who teach German history. One of them will remain nameless. I never really got along with him. He was sort of a schmuck. But the guy who replaced him, I was very close to. And Adam replaced that guy. And the class was huge. It had about 200 people in the class. But he does an absolutely brilliant job teaching German history from the 30 Years' War to the present. And it'd be really a lot of fun to get him involved. He's very interested, by the way, in talking about the grand strategy conferences of World War II. So that is something that would be a lot of fun to get him involved with. He says, how are you going to handle that? I said, well, I'm thinking about how to do it. I mean, what I think I'm going to do is put up the verbatim memos, and then people can start interrupting and saying, okay, what does this mean? What does that mean? Let's read it like a close read, as if we're reading a Shakespeare play, except we're reading a historical document. And so to prepare for that, I just finished reading about 5 books on Operation Torch, and I'm sort of trying to see how that would go, but I think it'd be fun, actually. So anyway, the main thing would be to make it fun, so it's not boring. Anyway, he would be a very interesting addition, and actually, you're recording this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so someone right now is working on him at dinner. So we'll see what happens. All right, well, why don't we just start? Okay, so Julian, why don't you start? Okay.
Well, before we start, let me just play this very short.
Yeah.
What is it? 1:30, just about the Iran war and what
All
the
right.
hell's going to happen. Let's just see
Okay.
what's out there.
All right.
Just give me a second. I think I got it primed up here, and I'm just going to share. And there it is. So this should be okay. Let's see. Let me go move that a little over there, a little over here. Good. Okay, now I'll play it. Come on, baby. Can we hear it?
Not really.
Okay, wait. There we
Will
go.
even happen today before the ceasefire expires at midnight. Reporter Rebecca Castor has the latest from our nation's capital.
U.S. forces board a sanctioned oil tanker in the Indo-Pacific, transporting nearly 2 million barrels of Iranian oil to China. It never made it. The Pentagon says it stopped the ship without incident, preventing an influx of cash from getting into the regime's hands.
They're selling their oil at $60 a barrel. The money is where the action is. If we freeze it, they're going to go away pretty quick.
But will the economic pressure be enough to force the Iranians into a deal? President Trump says he does not want to extend the ceasefire, and Iran claims it's preparing to, quote, reveal new cards on the battlefield.
There's a high probability that nothing's going to come out of these peace talks. And Iran is saying they won't negotiate under coercion. I believe we will see strikes again on Wednesday night.
But the White House maintains the president is close to a deal, even if he has to follow through on his threat to target Iran's power plants and bridges.
The facts are the United States of America tonight have never been so close to making a truly good deal. If not, the president as commander-in-chief still has a number of options at his disposal that he's unafraid to use.
President Trump is also calling on Iran to release 8 women the regime is reportedly preparing to execute as a sign of goodwill before negotiations begin. In Washington, Rebecca Castor, Fox 13 News.
Okay, that's it. Go ahead. You got it, Jim.
All right. Well, anyway, fun to watch Fox.
We do have breaking news. The emergency unfolding right now. The images coming in. The fires, more than 50.
Oh, did I stop the sharing? I think so.
That was public television.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So, Julian, I have my own opinions about this, but let's lead off. Where do you think we're at with this war?
Well, I should be sitting down every day with my students and applying political science theories to try to predict what the outcome is going to be on the conflict. It was actually a competition in some of my classes to, identify the variables. I think there's an overarching variable here, which is that the nature of Iran's regime as essentially nationalistic, which means the people that are running the show they have a particular domestic agenda. And when you have a society with a domestic agenda, they fall back on history and they tend to ignore other countries, even if those other countries are particularly helpful as allies. And so we saw, was it 3 months ago, there was a summit in Beijing where the Chinese invited all of their senior political, military, and economic allies, but the Iranians didn't show up. And I think I think in part the Chinese didn't invite them because they invited the Saudis. But I've been worried that a war over Taiwan would end up being a Russian energy, food, and mineral supplies to China while the Iranians shut the straits. And that's for me been the nightmare scenario, because it would mean the Europeans would have to be left to dealing with Iran, which is a very large country demographically, and has a fairly large ground military. And the Europeans have amphibious capability, but maybe they could lift a brigade or a division at the same time and provide air cover and have the logistics going all the way back to Europe around the Cape of Good Hope. So, looking at what Iran is doing today, it's remarkably isolated. The Iranians, the Iranian grade schools teach all of their children that in 1828, the largest chunk of Iran was taken out by Russia, essentially giving independence to Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia. That was all Persian-held territory. And you can see today the good relations the Armenians have with Iran. There's a historical basis for the Iranians protecting the Armenians. So, so when we look at when I try to predict what's going to happen, on the one hand, I think I'm pretty sure we're looking at an Iran that's going to go it alone, and that's in some ways it's a relief if you're not Iranian and you're looking on the outside, because there isn't a lot of opportunity for escalation. The Chinese are mostly backing the Saudis. The Chinese see Iran as useful. I think the Chinese certainly don't want Iran to capitulate in the way that Syria or Iraq has, but the Chinese are not going to intervene to save Iran, and neither are the Russians. So in fact, I think the US leadership has a lot more freedom to act than they think. Now, the US wild card, again, I have to apologize 10 times, because I understand in American historiography, the genius of George Washington and Paine and Hamilton and Adams, the Americans somehow spontaneously created this new political method and identity. But I see American behavior having British origins, and I particularly the breakdown that occurred in British identity during the British Civil War. And it's the Americans are, they're not characterized as Puritans. They're characterized as people who want to hold onto their property. What the Americans didn't save was this British fear of foreign invasion, because no matter what was going on within England, whether it was the War of the Roses or whether it was the British Civil War, the British always came together when there was a foreign threat. The Americans didn't preserve that. And so it's a wild card. I mean, Trump's got complete freedom. I mean, this is sort of obvious, right? That the U.S. is so immensely powerful and protected by oceans that the foreign policy ends up being the personality of the president. And what's curious about this is that the Cuban Missile Crisis didn't have the long-term impact on American vulnerability that we thought it did. If you recall the contract with America that Newt Gingrich signed in 1992, At the time, most Americans thought they already had a missile defense over America, right? When they were polling Americans are generally unaware of their vulnerability, especially in the post-Cold War era. And that could go back to the 1980s. I think some people were very concerned in the 1980s, but I think the vast majority of the people were just enjoying the immense production of wealth in the 1980s. And that's carried on ever since. I mean, Americans think of America as having problems with the environment, with crime, with immigrants, but Americans, at least no longer. Maybe the boomers think this, but not the Gen Xers. Of course, the Russians now have about 3,500 warheads, and not all of those are on ICBMs. Maybe a third of those are on ICBMs. So, in a real sense, America is much safer than it used to be. But the Russians still have a lot of nukes. China last year, if you look at the IISS military balance, last year the Chinese did not have 150 DF-1s in the silos, and this year in 2026 they do, or at least in the 2025 edition, they not. So China, and if those are 10 warheads per, we're looking at 1,500 additional warheads. It could be 750 if you've got 5 warheads in each of those missiles. But there's been a huge strategic shift empowering China. Now, how reliable is the Chinese military? I don't know. So that's all to say, this is why I've not been trying to make predictions, because it boils down to Iranian nationalism and Trump. And Trump's imagination and the people around him. What I think should happen is, you have to return back to a bipartisan agreement on what matters for the long-term interest in the U.S. And the long-term interest is clearly against the America Firsters, which is for America to be safe. And the biggest threat is no longer the lack of trade, as it was under Woodrow Wilson when he tried to make the world safe for democracy. I think the number one threat is nuclear proliferation. And Trump's been fanning the benefits of having a nuclear weapon. So I think there needs to be a bipartisan reawakening. And I think it could come as a shock. If the Iranians detonate a weapon underground, and the Russians and Chinese then guarantee its protection, or if the Saudis do some sort of arrogant reveal to tell the Israelis to chill, then other countries in the world will see the advantage of nuclear weapons. I mean, we already have the North Koreans constantly showing off. If there is a tiny bit of a lack of confidence in the American deterrent to South Korea and Japan, they and Australia are going to go nuclear. So I think those are the stakes. I don't think Trump cares about that. I mean, I think his priorities are really about his personality, and the Americans are doing what they're doing not because we're moving to multipolarity, not because this is the end of empire. It's because the Americans are so rich. They're 25% of the world's GDP. They've gone way past China. China is horribly misgoverned. I mean, you certainly have a lot of technology being developed, but you have huge unemployment, and you have a gerontocracy that has basically delegitimized themselves in the face of the youth, the under 40 cohort. Russia, same thing. The under 40s do not like Putin. Europeans, they're spending a lot more money on quality of life and a lot less money on productivity. So, in some ways, the Rosenbergs were right when they shared nuclear technology with the Soviet Union. They were terrified of a version of America that becomes the bully. In part because most Americans don't care about what's going on the outside. So I have no prediction about what's going to happen. I should, but I don't.
Take your PhD in political science away from you. Well, yeah. So yes, it's a very unpredictable situation. There's no doubt about it.
I wanted to throw something in about what Julian said on China.
Right.
I think I just tried to verify this and I wasn't able to, but I watched the broadcast that was indicating Trump's really trying to get an effect on China because they need the oil from Iran and Turkey, not just for energy, but for producing plastics that goes into all of the goods that they ship to us, the phones, the Chop-O-Matics, all the devices and things they make are mostly dependent on plastics, which comes from the oil. So their boycott, not the boycott, the U.S. preventing them from getting oil from Iran and Venezuela concurrently interferes with the Chinese economy because they need the raw materials distributed not to just big energy plants, but to all the thousands of manufacturing companies throughout China that need basic materials to make products that then they can distribute to Europe and the U.S. So it's hurting their economy, and they were speculating that this is 4th-degree chess in the Trump house. That's the way they think things.
I think, Ken, you're completely right. I mean, the Chinese margin of profit on EVs is very, very slight. The Chinese are prioritizing trade. If you look at the German logic to fighting the British in the lead up to World War I, it was because the British were becoming more protectionist, and the Germans created an ideology based on the British cutting Germans off from their exports. So the Germans built up a fleet to defeat the British, even though the largest market of German exports was the British Empire.
Right.
If you look at Japan in World War II, same thing. They're afraid of the cutoff. I don't think China's afraid of a cutoff. I mean, China looks at the U.S., they look at the internal debate, and Trump's weak. So the America firsters, the America the autarkic, which is not even real, because the U.S. Does not produce enough of the kind of oil that the people consume to operate transport, personal transport, and commercial transport. The Chinese are fairly reassured that the U.S. is not going to block off trade, even though in some respects it's quite unprecedented in peacetime to this extent for the U.S. Navy to be stopping tankers of other countries. I think Trump's been pretty good in not stopping Chinese tankers. And I think that's fairly predictable.
And then one other thing in terms of what you said, don't you feel that the U.S. was behind World War II eventually after Pearl Harbor? Wasn't the country, everything stopped and they started making tanks and cannons and everything supported them and Lend-Lease programs? I thought the whole country, I was born at the end of the war, so I can't speak directly from, except for what I see in the movies. So what wasn't the U.S. as a population behind our efforts in World War II?
So are you asking about war profiteering?
No, I'm asking about, you said like in the United States, maybe baby boomers used to get behind the U.S. when they had a foreign conflict. But Gen Z doesn't. But I'm saying we were, the country was behind the efforts of World War II, 90%.
I think there was a special combination of both liberal and, I'm not going to say realpolitik, because I don't think the Americans think about power even when they have a lot of it. It's not a popular viewpoint, but from a Canadian perspective, I think we interpret American domestic politics as very tribal and very racial, and the Americans very often associate foreign societies with domestic groups. So in the West Coast, you had hostility to Japanese people who looked like they could out immigrate European descended Americans. And that did have an effect on Japanese-American relations. So, I would describe the American impulse to fight the Nazis as the liberal impulse, and the American impulse to fight the Japanese as coming out of American domestic politics, where they're trying to preserve their European population against, Latinos, African Americans, indigenous Arabs, people that they've encountered while nation building. So, I think we still have that today. But Trump is not a convincing person to get us to oppose Iran, because Iran is not liberal. Because Trump is behaving in many ways illiberally by his support for Israel. So, obviously he's not convincing to most Americans. I would say 50 to 60% of Americans.
Right now.
Yeah.
But you say in the past, it was better. There was more support behind the foreign.
Oh, no. America is more unified today than ever. Definitely. Holy cow. Come on. if you look at the fragmentation of American society before World War One, then after World War One, and then the 1930s, and then you look at the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, and then you look at the wave of youth in the 70s and 80s, and then the crime that followed in the 90s, and you look at the political footballing that was going on. It was outrageous. The America under Trump is much less manipulative than American politics during the American-Mexican War, for example, where you had business people in power in Washington basically promoting their favorite generals, and what is just outright. And the generals were playing politics. Generals, because they were business people before raising regiments or having these brevet ranks, they were strategically interacting with and manipulating the press against each other in public. That's gone. I mean, we don't. We have far less of it, I think it's because the population, American population, is better educated, and we have much faster access to information.
And there's one other thing we're all wondering: who is that? Who's that over in the left side of your shirt and on the?
This is Nimitz.
Who that?
Admiral Nimitz.
Oh,
the German American who basically ran the war against Japan in World War II.
Okay, thanks.
Chris, you want to jump in with something?
Yeah, I was going to point out that I thought it was the case that there was considerable opposition to involvement in World War II until the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. In fact, I recall that Roosevelt had to basically play some tricks to get past Congress to give England support because there was so much isolationist opinion that what Hitler was doing in Europe was the Europeans' problem, not Americans' problem. And I've even heard some people speculate that we knew about the impending attack on Pearl Harbor and that we wanted to let it happen so that we could justify getting into the war.
Well, okay, let me deal with that last part first. I don't agree with that. I do think that Roosevelt was indeed constrained domestically, and that you saw it in the 1940 election. You saw it in the look at the vote that happened to extend and create the draft. I think there was a vote that they only won by one, if I recall, in somewhere in 1941. There was really a lot of opposition to involvement in the war in Europe, in the United States. The America First movement was, there's interesting scholarship done on that. I know people who later served in World War II who were America Firsters, and a famous author in New York, Tom Fleming, who I got along with really well until he started to write about World War II. Well, I didn't realize he'd been an American Firster before he went to the Navy in World War II. So there was indeed a tremendous mixed opinion about isolationism, and the question of anti-Semitism comes into play for sure, because when you look at surveys up to Pearl Harbor, there was a lot of resistance to allowing any kind of quota of Jews to come in from Europe. Remember that famous story about the ship that was down in Havana that never was able to be allowed to come to the United States, I think in 1939, before the war broke out, and then they wind up in back in Europe. I remember a movie was done on that subject. So that was pretty clear before World War II. Now, I would also argue that FDR in the New Deal began to expand, particularly he starts with the naval budget. And it was partly given the fact that he had been the Assistant Secretary of the Navy in the First World War, and also he was a Navy man throughout. He wanted to build up the Navy because of the possible threat with Japan. which they always were motivated about. Now, the whole question of fighting against Japan, and again, how do we look at it in terms of the situation we're in right now? I think that what I find fascinating is the new America Firsters. I mean, that was the slogan that Trump used for his movement. Well, it looks to me like this conflict has put a serious fragmentation in that unity. Look at Megyn Kelly. Look at Tucker Carlson. Look at Alex Jones. Look at all these different people who were part of that whole panoply, and now they're attacking Trump openly. It's quite amazing to watch. Now, Trump quite intelligently brought in Joe Rogan. It sort of amused me. He brought Joe Rogan in a couple of days ago because I guess Joe Rogan likes to take acid. So he was defending the use of psychedelics in Rogan's, so I guess he's sort of cultivating him to do another, 2 or 3 hour show with Joe Rogan at some strategic point in the race to the midterms that'll sort of push it over a little bit. And I know that they have several times more money than the Democrats to affect the midterms. And so it's going to be, I don't think it's a big shoo-in because, you watch MS Now, you get look at what happened in Virginia. That was a pretty close race, by the way, in Virginia on that whole gerrymandering vote. Even though the Democrats won, it was really, I think it was by 2 or 3 or 4 points. So I think that, it's going to be interesting to watch how this is actually manifesting itself in these local races. I mean, but of course we're seeing all these races at the state level and attorney general races, assembly races, and the Democrats are kicking the shit out of the Republicans. So, but that can, Trump is not dumb. These people are not stupid. They can do all sorts of things. They have control of the federal government. They have control of the economy. Look at this big fight to put in the new replacement for Powell. They want to make sure that they lower the interest rates so that they can get a recovery or counter the downward trends by lowering interest rates that will obviously affect them in the midterms. Because and that's another question to talk about, the global economic effect of this conflict, which is disparately affecting people around the world. I mean, down to, look at Pakistan. Pakistan, in terms of the lower classes in Pakistan, are getting affected by the price of oil going up, the same way in India. And Asia, I think, has had a bigger hit than other parts of the world in terms of the impact of these rising prices. Now, there's one thing I came across today that I found very interesting. They were talking about the economic effect of this war on the economy of Iran. And they were talking about how 50% of the jobs in the economy have been directly affected by this, attack on the economy. And about 10% of the workforce has lost their jobs as a result of the war so far. Now, I guess if I was calculating to cause a social disruption or a social breakdown, I would be wanting to aim and exacerbate those kind of tensions economically. And Trump just announced today, like, they're losing $500 million. I mean, I don't know how much they're losing. I mean, that could be an accurate figure. I don't know. But I do think that they have really completely underestimated the issue of Iranian nationalism. Now, the issue of Iranian nationalism is quite interesting. There was a unofficial teach-in at Columbia this week that was not publicized. It was essentially a teach-in on the Iran war. And they had 6 or 7 people speak, and then everybody went at it. They included somebody who'd been in the National Security Council, energy specialist, to the first Iranian ambassador to the United States after the revolution. And everybody was all over the place about what their opinions were. But one person, the question of how many people are actually loyal to the regime is, to me, an interesting question. I don't know. People are talking about 15 to 20% are loyal to the regime. I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. And I know that the regime has engaged in repression I don't know what the actual numbers are. Are they 3,000, 70,000, whatever they are? We know the regime is engaged in repression. But whether the situation will, quote, cause a collapse, who's going to blink first? Who's going to blink first? And what's also ironic in what we're seeing with the negotiations with Trump is it's, some of it's sort of ridiculous. I mean, they're actually talking about measures that were actually not that different from the JCPOA that he threw out the door back in the first administration. And this war also, as we all know, is not have popular support in the United States. That's unusual for a conflict because after Pearl Harbor, forget about it. Most of the Americans were in favor of fighting against the Japanese, and the Germans, of course, declared war on us about a week, or I think a week later, or somewhere, certainly a short period of time after Pearl Harbor. And then you have the question of the Korean War. Now, how does public opinion stay? How long do they sort of just blindly follow the president and stay loyal to that? That doesn't last long in American wars. That Korean War, Vietnam War, a good example. You had high support in the beginning, and then started to erode. The longer the war goes on, it erodes. And in this particular case, he's not starting with popular support. I mean, it's really an interesting situation. I've never seen this with a major conflict going on, except, of course, he can sustain this because, however, lose their lives, we're about, literally, 500 or 600 killed a week, or 700 killed a week during it happened in the war. And that's not affecting, that would be a whole different ballgame. So, but again, in terms of predictions, I agree with Julian. We're in a very dynamic and unpredictable situation. Very unpredictable. And I don't, if Frank was here, he'd start making predictions, and I would sit there and start breaking his chops. But, he's not here right now. He'll probably come in later, I guess. But I just don't want. I'm very, very reluctant to make any prediction at all. I mean, the one thing I will say is I think I'm going to follow more carefully what's going on in Iran, and it's hard to get information about that. Very hard. And then look what happened in the Gulf today. I think there was a skirmishing. Several vessels were attacked by the IRGC. And then you had the counter with the Americans, with that blockade. It's like at the Straits of Hormuz. Blockade again, a blockade on top of a blockade. And are those mariners in there going to start, resuming, normal traffic? I don't think so. I mean, who's going to take the risk that some surface missile will be launched from Iran that'll hit some tanker and blow the damn thing up? It's a serious risk. So I don't know. It's hard to predict.
Sorry, Jim, could I just add one thing? This is a book that my students will be reading. It's an old book, 1995. It's Selling War by Nicholas John Cull, and it looks at the British propaganda campaign to get the Americans in on World War II. So there's no question that you can manufacture consent, but it's really hard to do. And some people, I think most people exaggerate the ease of affecting people's emotional reactions to things. I mean, certainly at Columbia University, we were affected because Woodrow Wilson had his campaign manager have sort of an Anglophobic campaign, which resulted in the president of Columbia University, Burgess, getting fired in order so he could prepare the Americans for entering into World War I. So, there's a reason the box of cereal, 30% of the cost is marketing, because marketing, especially in politics, does work. But it's the old problem of, the Marxist problem between objective and subjective interests, where we don't know what the objective interest is. And once marketing's had its effect, we end up assuming that people always thought that. So I think your description of the American sentiment prior to World War II is probably more accurate than what I was presenting.
Well, no, I don't. Well, I've been thinking. Well, and one thing I noticed, by the way, when people raise the F word, the fascism word, is I'm noticing that one problem I have with, really good scholars who are completely familiar with the distinction between fascism and National Socialism and all, I think my problem sometimes is that they are not that aware of American domestic history in terms of the ultra right. I mean, and how it evolved, and the depth and breadth of it. Um, and Trump, of course, it's still amazing to me. I got into a fight. I sent a 4-star admiral. I decided to argue with the guy. I said, look, you're actually supporting a foreign policy where the vice president goes off and helps Orban try to win. I mean, look at that objectively. I mean, is that something that you think is here? Do you really think this person represents bona fide American values? And I put that in quotes. Or do you really think that off Deutschland in Saxony that J.D. Vance actually put a plug in last year in Munich? Do you think neo-Nazism reflects American values? I mean, it's astounding to me. And it was funny. Someone today just said, it's amazing that nobody has, done a teach-in or actually responded to this whole war so far. At Columbia, I mean, there's been demonstrations in New York. Don't get me wrong. There's lots of demonstrations all the time, but people are, I don't know. I guess people are battered down. I mean, there's, just as one Gen Z said to me. He said to me, Jim, I was 10 years old when Trump was elected president, and now I'm 18, or now I'm 20. And, it's something to think about. I said, Jesus, I never thought about that. Like somebody who's 10 years old and all you've had is Donald Trump as president of the United States. What a treat. What a treat. You know. But Tristan, what do you think? I know Ted went off. What do you think, Tristan?
Uh, well, a lot was said there. I guess to speak on the Iran issue, I definitely agree with Dr. Schofield that they are not likely to receive any sort of substantial assistance from, China or Russia. Um, I and like you, I'm reticent to try to make any sort of predictions about what's going to happen. Um, I don't think we're going to see a ground invasion into Iran by the United States, especially with the midterms coming up. I think um, Trump, I think the Republicans probably are not going to fare well in the midterms, just because of Trump's sort of um, expeditionary attitude, when that's kind of completely the opposite of why his base sort of voted for him in the first place.
Right.
Um, I unfortunately haven't had a lot of time to pay close attention to the situation, because I've just been busy with school stuff. And it seems like the whether the Gulf is open or closed seems to vary from day to day. I'm not really convinced that Trump is really going to get what he wants out of this, and it's still not really clear to me what he wants exactly. Um, I think one key takeaway though from this conflict is that Iran now has a very acute understanding that they can cause a lot of damage internationally, because of their sort of dominance over the Gulf.
Sorry, Jim, can I jump in there?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I think what Tristan is saying is bang on. But if we look at the counterfactual of if Trump had exerted the effort that, say, George Bush Sr. or even George W. Bush had made by first consulting East Asian allies and Europeans, this would have gone off very differently. I suspect that in the post-Trump world, even if there is a Republican president, they're going to go to Europe right after their inauguration. They're going to go to Japan. Then they're going to talk to India and China, and then the Iranians are going to withdraw. Once the Iranians see a consensus among the major economies, they're going to pull back from the Straits. I think the spoiler could be if Israel attacks Iran continuously, it would be because the Americans provided Israel the weapons to do that, and then this would fail. But if it's a genuine multilateral consultation, Iran's just going to pull out. And I mean, I would predict that's probably the path that we're going to have. I did want to make one comment as someone who doesn't know much about American politics, but I was looking at the Guardian, I believe it was, now identifying Nick Fuentes specifically as representative of what they described as a blue-collar rights movement that is very similar to the left. And the reason I think the Republicans won't be swept so easily is you have a very divisive a very divisive competition between progressives and what I think are, the moderates who are able to raise money in the Democratic Party. And so it really is a four-player game. It's not your sort of Duverger's model where everyone charges, both of the left and the right party charge to the center. Now, when they're charging to the center, we already have a pre-established group in the extreme left and the extreme right that actually converge on some issues. And that creates, in a mathematical sense, a very, very complicated type of electoral process.
Yeah, they actually have a term for that. They call it a horseshoe effect, which I find fascinating, where the extreme right meets the extreme left. And, and how many people I know on the left who totally have complete contempt for normal electoral politics? Plenty. They're not going to get involved with them. They just disdain that automatically. Now, I consider that idiotic, but that's how some people are. And, and all their criticisms of the electoral political system, a lot of it I agree with. It just is that's the only game in town. So, unless you have an armed revolutionary movement, or something like that, you got to deal with it, whether you like it or not. And, that's where you sort of see the Mamdanis of the world, or, the sort of democratic socialist types around the country. But again, I would not, discount how these guys are doing. Now, for example, there's a very good article in ProPublica about all the measures that Trump is taking to basically disrupt the midterms and make it consciously doing this. Plus, you have all these people who were prominent in the January 6th movement essentially being empowered to go after his enemies. And that's going on too. It's a really and again, compared to 1968, it's not the same as 1968. We're not in a major ground war where we have 500,000 or 600,000 troops fighting. We're not thinking about escalating the war, which is what occurred before Tet. It's a whole, but then how do you make analogies? What's the lesson of making analogies in the present situation when in some cases we're in uncharted territory here? We've never had a president like this before. This guy's, it's like Archie Bunker on steroids in the White House. It's just, and then he's not Archie Bunker. He's from Queens, but he's not Archie Bunker. And it's quite an astounding phenomena to have to really think through carefully. And I also wonder about the structural aspects of this, because Trump is representing a whole bunch of tendencies politically, and they are formations and disgruntlements in the Republican Party going back to the election of Goldwater, going back to the response to Brown versus Board of Education, going back to the 50s, going back to the 60s. And again, how it plays out, I don't know. It's a very disturbing and profound situation to watch. Um, Trump actually said that he could have won the Vietnam War, which I found highly entertaining. That one made me laugh. I fell off the floor with that one. I guess he decided, when he's using bomb back to the Stone Age, he's copying Curtis LeMay, when Curtis LeMay said that in 1965, and that, of course, like doomed the Republicans. That was, um, not something that helped them get elected. Look what happened in '64 with the Goldwater defeat. However, in '66 they do better in the midterms. So this is going to be an interesting thing to watch what happens here.
Sorry, I just want to say, Sorley came out with a book about 20 years ago,
Oh yeah.
which looked at the last 7 years of the Vietnam War.
Mhm.
And so I'm actually in the camp where the Vietnam War could have been won after 69, after
Oh,
1970.
Gino.
So it's sort of a minority view that in 72, I think Vietnam did win and the US pulled out. But I think the point was that it was the Christmas bombing and the bombing, of course, in Cambodia created such an anti-government shock because of the tradition of the government lying. And it's amazing that you actually lie about B-52s bombing Cambodia, that even into the mid 1980s, I remember people wearing T-shirts about the bombing of Cambodia in Canada. So, it had a sort of a long-term anti-war resonance. That was basically almost a decade and a half after the event.
Well, Tom, do you think Trump could have won the Vietnam War?
No,
Seriously.
no,
Well,
I
not
don't think he
Trump.
could. I don't think he could have. No, because he doesn't know enough stuff about the military. He avoided the draft 5 fucking times. He couldn't win anything except a chicken coop, maybe.
Well, anyway, he did say he could have won the Vietnam War this week. I thought that was quite entertaining, I must admit.
Yeah, oh yeah. I don't know where he gets that, but he must have some wild dreams at night. I don't know.
Yeah,
At his age, I imagine he has wild dreams at night.
yes, indeed, indeed, indeed. And that gets me to another issue here with the good old Melania. Now, the reason why supposedly she decided to do that press conference was because she was afraid that her pal her pal who she had not interfered with to prevent the husband from getting the woman deported, and they were having a custody fight and a fight over the divorce or something like that. This guy
Mm.
Zampoli. So she basically Zampoli squealed on ICE and had her deported to Brazil. So she got really pissed off and basically said, "Look, I'm going to blow the whistle on everything that I know about you, your husband, and Jeffrey Epstein." And it still remains just plodding along there. Good old Jeffrey Epstein, with all the craziness of the Trump administration. And it was so funny when I was trolling into Fox, every once in a while, Pam Bondi. I don't know whether it's a bot, the real person, but I made a comment where I said, "Poor Pam Bondi. She just followed orders. Look what happened to her." And so I see that somebody who identified themselves as Pam Bondi gives me a like on the social media feed, which sort of made me laugh. And I said, "Oh well, I know it's not Pam Bondi, but it's truly ridiculous." I mean, look, I mean, Julian, from the point of view of an American, and the same to you, Tristan. This is like watching, like a Batman comic book movie for real. I mean, it's just crazy.
Well,
You
it's
know,
interesting. It's interesting things are starting to come out. This How long can we keep the troops over there, and how long can we keep this huge navy over there? You know, it's the roosters are going to come home to roost, and we can't keep them over there, Vert. too much longer. I don't think. Or we're gonna have big problems ourselves.
Well, that's a good point. And I don't, he wants to raise the defense budget by up to 1.5 trillion, and I think he asked for another 100 billion to cover the expenses of the war. So you're talking about what, a 60% in, or 60 to 70% a 60% increase in the defense budget.
Mm.
Now, Julian, I don't know what your feeling is about this in terms of, you mentioned the issue of autarky earlier. I mean, these guys, I've looked at some really good studies on basically how they, all the industrial base to build naval ships has been basically deteriorated, et cetera, et cetera. And I can understand that perspective. But on the other hand, I'm saying to myself, well, how much are we in a situation where it's like the Royal Navy after World War II or something like this? Yes, we have the power, we have this, we have that, we have 25% of the world economy, not 50% as we had in 45. And, what is the best choice of action to deal with? I just think it's better to have a détente and peaceful relations with China. I just think this idea of stirring up an arms race is just is counterproductive. But that's what we're in. We're in an arms race with China right now. That's for sure.
I'm not sure that the 1.5 trillion was intended for the Pacific. There's a big draw again for the Middle East. It's shocking how expensive it is to protect yourself against drones if you don't have a fine-grained approach like the Ukrainians who,
well, if we want to really go after the Chinese, we're better to save Taiwan, because we'll lose Taiwan if we're not careful.
Well, that's something interesting, because how do you assess, Julian, like that guy who worked in the CIA, Chris? Doesn't he basically say they just don't have the amphibious lift to do it at this point?
Yeah, so just before this meeting, we had a Dupuy Institute meeting, and we meet twice a week, and we're running a whole bunch of models. The Chinese have certain critical weaknesses, particularly anti-submarine warfare, that makes it very unlikely that they're not a confident ocean-going navy. Their ballistic missile submarines have not patrolled outside of the South China Sea. They do have a lot of ICBMs now that are in the ground in the last 12 months. But I think that's, it's an unusable force. If the U.S. attempts a first strike on China, those silos are gone, and then the Chinese are, they're going to be on their back feet.
Where do you get the idea that anybody's considering a first strike on China? Where do you get that screwy goddamn idea?
Because U.S. nuclear strategy has always been damage limitation. Always. From the
we're not going to attack Taiwan. We're going to just hope they don't try to take the island away from us. Come on.
I think you're quite right. But in the age of nuclear weapons, all use of conventional force is essentially theatrical. It's essentially what you're sending people to die, and they're fighting in their tanks and their airplanes and their ships. But ultimately, the crisis is going to be resolved by the balance of nuclear weapons. So there's, at the Brent Scowcroft Center, it's being headed now by a man called Matthew Krenig, who's ex-CIA. He's now a full professor at Georgetown. And he came out with a book looking at past crises, which basically showed that the outcome is on how many nuclear weapons you had. And it's not because people ran detailed simulations. It was from just the general intuition, for example, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, that if the Russians fired what they had out of Cuba, and then the Americans put their B-47s over the Soviet Union, and then the Soviet Union put its missiles on top of Europe, in general, the Soviet Union would do much worse. And so if we had a war over Taiwan, Beijing and Washington are not going to ignore nuclear weapons. Now, I think you're right, Colonel Morgan, that you'd have to be nuts to use nuclear weapons. But when people are desperate, they're tempted to detonate one weapon at sea to signal, look, we're desperate, we're serious. And the U.S. has reacted in that logic in Ukraine. every time Putin faces a dramatic drop in his fighting ability in Ukraine, he threatens to go nuclear. And the US, I think it was a year ago, they cut Starlink to Ukraine for a week to give the Russian, to sort of even out the fight. It's super, super cynical. The Americans helping the Russians, but it's the Russians are thinking in terms of nuclear weapons because they're terrified of the Russian state breaking up again along ethnic lines. So,
Well, all right. I've met nuclear strategists from the Soviet Union. I've actually I've been to conferences with them, and they're not they're completely aware of how crazy it would be to have a nuclear war. Totally. I think that's an interesting point you make, Julian, about how the nuclear balance has been used in Cold War crises to, quote, get one side to blink. Okay. And I don't disagree with you about the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's pretty clear that the Soviets, the missile gap, all that, whether, they knew that they couldn't, they knew the balance of power was totally disproportionate if you look at the nuclear capability in the United States' favor. Now, what worries me sometimes is that I remember when I used to read, I've read all the literature about Reagan. Now, Reagan eventually got freaked out about nuclear war. He eventually got, he made some of his advisors in the first or second year of his administration made some, pretty crazy statements. But it was essentially, I felt in retrospect, designed to justify the increase in the defense budget, which they were doing. Now, Trump, I always wonder when you read accounts of him in the first administration, when he's being schooled by the professional military, like Kelly, like Mattis, like what's his name, McMaster, all these guys, they're probably talking, if they're actually giving objective and realistic briefings to him, they're talking about the negative aspects of nuclear war. And I don't know, it's an interesting question about how much Trump has absorbed all this, because he likes to, I think, act out the madman theory of Richard Nixon. When H.R. Haldeman was walking on the beach at San Clemente and he said, look, I'm just going to threaten the North Vietnamese with all sorts of things, and they're just think I'm going to be nuts. And that was, quote, the madman theory, which he, of course, did during the Indochina War. And Trump, I think, exults in that. He certainly uses that to threaten the Iranians. Now, the Iranians, they sort of call his bluff. And, again, this latest thing he's designed, yes, they do have the capability to essentially logistically hit every bridge, hit every, to me, it was like similar to what they did against the North Koreans with the air campaign after 1951, when we had air supremacy south of the Yalu, not along the Yalu, because that was contested with the Soviets and the Chinese and the Koreans, but certainly the Soviets were there in force. But, this is a totally different situation in Iran. We have air supremacy over them. Now, what does that mean? Can the idea that an air campaign can solely overthrow a government, can that be proven to be a new paradigm? I guess that's what they're trying to do with this air campaign. Because I think when Aaron was here a couple of weeks ago, he threw out a very interesting statistic that they had 325,000 JDAM kits. And now they're going to increase the amount of munitions by several times. So they're replacing all the stuff that they shot. And so they can continue this for quite a long time. And eventually you start getting into questions of affecting civilian life to the point that it can be unbearable. I guess the whole point there is to have the population essentially overthrow the government, which is what they would like to do, but didn't happen. Because they don't have the what's ridiculous about this is, as you well know, the monopoly of the means of violence is still held by the Iranian government. The RGC, the Artesh, the Basij, they haven't fragmented. They haven't decided to become disloyal. So they can, and then of course the other thing that gets me is who made the stupid calculations that they wouldn't close the Straits of Hormuz? I mean, who's the dumb shitheads who made that? Who is advising him that this would not be a logical outcome over actually initiating a air campaign against them? Who gave the advice to Trump about this? I mean, if you read that Hagerman piece, supposedly all the professional types the next day said, forget about it. It's all a bunch of bullshit. And then they decided, Trump decided, they sort of say, well, Trump decided to buy in to the Mossad chief's briefing and Netanyahu. I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, we really don't know. We don't know. We don't have the documents to actually ascertain any of this for sure. But Aaron, we're talking about the latest developments in the situation in the Middle East. So I'm sort of curious what you think.
Oh, there's something going on in the Middle East? No, I'm joking. Well, no, I mean, it's obviously, sort of an American strategic catastrophe at this point because the United States gave away, strategic dominance and escalation to the Iranians, both at a sort of a functional level and a tactical level, right? Like, the idea that, and I'm sure this will come out eventually, but this was a very Air Force led, strategy when we launched this.
Yeah, go on. You dropped your mic?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah. So this was an Air Force led strategy by both, obviously, the chair of the Joint Chiefs and the CENTCOM. And, there's tons of Air Force guys everywhere. And then we, figured out after, 3-4 weeks that, oh yeah, this whole like Navy thing kind of is important. And we still haven't fully mobilized U.S. Navy, given the context of the requirements across the whole region from the Med all the way down through, the Red Sea and across the Southern Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf. I mean, we probably don't have, you probably have a third of our Navy assets that we probably need surrounding.
You may have a third of the Navy, but the other third is dry docked because they're trying to fix them. They break like hell. My son works for
Tom, let me finish. Okay. Dude.
Well, I'm listening to this bullshit and I'm.
Why are you such an asshole, dude? Like, why?
Now, come on, guys.
No, seriously. I mean, he does this every time, Jim, and you tolerate it.
All right, come on. Just
ridiculous.
Go on, Aaron.
Well, who gave you the?
Go on, Aaron.
Okay. Jesus. So, but anyway, the point is that, okay, you should know what Navy assets are available, and that will obviously create the constraints of your operational planning, because those become the limits of what you have and you don't have. And so it doesn't seem that, and especially with, they whacked the Navy secretary today, right? So, that's kind of weird. And they seem to be whacking, senior flag officers left and right over the last couple months, through this operation. So it looks like we're sort of spiraling at this point, and there doesn't seem to be any clean path, except for us to de-escalate. And if we de-escalate, are the Iranians smart enough right now? Like, do they, like, strategically, to read that and de-escalate themselves, so that they don't try to so that they don't overreach, right? Because then if they do, then we'll come back in, and we'll just go into a spot. We'll just go into a cycle with them, right? And there doesn't seem to be any mediators. I mean, the Pakistanis are, offering the venue and, trying to do some shuttle stuff, but the Chinese don't seem to want to have anything to do with this. And no one else, the Japanese or no one else, seems to be able to sort of step in to try to mediate this down. And so I think in some ways we're sort of stuck here. And of course, we've already got 1 billion barrels taken out of the market after a couple months, and it's probably at this point going to be another 1 billion barrels, and you're not making up for those billions of barrels, not in the short term. And so the economic cost to that and impact is, eventually going to be, substantially felt by people. So yeah, it's a pretty ugly situation right now. I don't think there's some easy out. And our asks are so large right now. We're saying you don't get any money, and whenever we decide to give you some money, it's going to be little itty bitty pieces. But you need to, have no nuclear program, no ballistic program, no drone program. You're going to de-escalate and, basically defang yourself from the Gulf. I mean, basically, you're going to do some form of surrender. And the Iranians are not going to accept that, right? They can't. And until we construct some other structure diplomatically that the Iranians, that any state would accept, I mean, at this point, I think the only thing that makes any sense is, get the nuclear material out, like cut a deal where you really scrape the nuclear material out, and then they get access back into markets, back into sanctions free, or at least some substantial sanctions relief. And then when that works and it's proven, then you substantially deconflict from the Gulf at that point, which would probably be a year from now. And then I think that's as good as it gets. And then that's it. And then you've got to have a permanent presence there that's substantially larger than we've had, because you can't take the risk that this re-escalates and you just don't have the naval assets and the air defense assets. So, this is the biggest strategic challenge we've had, I think, since the Cold War, really. And we are not positioned politically at all for this. I mean, even the $500 billion request doesn't reflect this. It like kind of reflects, I don't know, Ukraine a little bit. I don't know, some version of all the above, but it doesn't reflect what we need to deal with this. This is like another, whatever, $250 billion you need for this. And I don't think they're smart enough to figure that out. So yeah, we're in a pickle here, as the old saying goes.
Yeah. Go on, Tristan. What are you going to say?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So just to piggyback a little bit off of what Aaron was saying, and to address your point about the domestic situation in Iran, I think I definitely agree with Aaron that the possibility of U.S. strategic gains at this point are going to be extremely limited. The Especially in terms of like regime change, which sort of seemed like Donald Trump was hoping for sort of early in the conflict. I think the window for that has sort of shut, I think. Like the Now, of course, it's hard to know what's going on there because they seem to have more or less successfully blocked off communications from inside the country. But I think if they were going to seek regime change, they would have had to do it early when they were still sort of hot on the tails of the social unrest that had been happening. And Another important factor, I think, is that the U.S. Is sort of running out of assets that it has available to protect its partners in the area, right? Like I was reading yesterday or the day before that like the U.S. had used up, just in this conflict, had used up like approximately half of the entire stock of THAAD and Patriot ammunition. And so I think the U.S. is going to be increasingly limited going forward in the effects that they can actually produce on the ground in Iran, because the Iranians supposedly have been rapidly increasing production of the weapons that they can deploy against sort of regional targets. And so, that's going to sort of include Kuwait, Oman, the UAE, all the targets that they've been striking in response to the US and Israeli attacks. And it kind of seems like the Iranians are able to produce things like the Shahed drones. Um, much faster and much cheaper than the US and its allies can produce countermeasures. So I think it's going to be a major consideration for the US, how much how much retaliation they're willing to risk. And so I think going forward from this point, probably they aren't going to be able to do a whole lot. Um, just because they're risking so much for any sort of strikes that they might try to affect in Iran.
All right, yeah, good points. Um,
Okay, this is Ken. I'd like to bring in a
okay.
consideration. Most people seem to be talking with, how can we wind this down so both entities survive, nobody wins, there's some accommodation, or maybe you're favor getting rid of Trump and we apologize, or something, or our side kind of wins and the Iranians take over and they flip the government. But I'm not hearing anybody talking like a belligerent military guy says, here, how are we going to destroy this and take over control, and we'll run Iran and we'll change the name to Trumpville or something, to do whatever. We're just going to conquer and go in there with flags and take over and run the country. And, we'll just teach them how to do that. And we'll teach them, and we'll invent a new wing of the Muslim religion, the Islam, that's not so radical and so crazy. But we're going to go in there. Let's say it was Teddy Roosevelt or somebody. I'm not saying that we should do that, but you have to, in the military, take a consideration of all options, not just the nice, polite ones. You have to say, we're going to, the way the Israelis got the people in Jordan to get these pagers that they had hacked, and then at a certain point in time they just blew up the pagers. That's really nasty. They got real nasty. So I'm just saying, what is the theoretical method whereby the U.S. or gets some allies, goes in there, U.S. and Israel, maybe they get one Arab state like Dubai or Jordan to go in along with them. But what is the way to go towards a belligerent military solution?
Well, I would think I just want before. Let me just show this. They'd need national mobilization, which is not going to happen. They would need a force close to 1 million troops. I mean, we're talking about a population of 90 million people. We're talking about a unprecedented mobilization to actually affect that. And then that's another issue that's interesting that you raised, Kenny. The whole question of the Gulf Cooperation Council of States, the GCC states. These states were basically made as allies. They were sort of joined together, I think, after the Iranian Revolution. I mean, there was also that whole question when the British withdrew from the Persian Gulf. And then there was the vacuum of power played after 1971 by the Americans. And we went in and filled that vacuum. But then they decided to organize what is now the GCC. because for several factors, including the fact that most of the people, this is something that I think Alex always focuses in on, a large amount of the workforce in the Gulf at that time were Palestinians. And so they immediately wanted to change that because the Palestinians were viewed as an internal threat politically, and they, completely changed the composition of their workforce in all the countries: Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, what became the UAE, Oman, etc. Now, here's something I always wanted to show you. This is the first, because it raises a question to me about what's actually happening in Iran. So here's a report in The Guardian today of 2 million people lost their jobs because of the war. And now again, I don't know I've not really looked carefully at this. I hope I will now. That about 10 to 12 million jobs, roughly 50% of Iran's workforce, are at risk. And here is the Ghulam Hussein Mohammadi says that the war has led to the loss of more than 1 million jobs and direct and indirect unemployment of 2 million people, which it doesn't, of course, people can't work because of, destruction. And so how's that going to affect the internal situation in Iran? And then, of course, what the reporting in the Guardian live feed was basically talking about, the situation in Lebanon with the whole question of, who's going to deal with Hezbollah, or how they're going to handle Hezbollah. And I think if you go to the IDF website, you'll see that there are 5 divisions of Israeli troops inside Lebanon, and they have pushed back maybe 10 kilometers or so, in a whole swath of areas along the border, and basically pushed everybody out. And they say you're not coming back. So, and that of course is causing international friction in the EU, etc. And look what happened. And there was a vote to try to exclude Israel's status, allowing it to export goods into the EU, and that was vetoed by the Italians and the Germans. But that's going to just continue. Go on, Aaron. You just have to unmute, Aaron.
Yep. Can you hear me okay?
Got it.
Yes. Yes, we hear you, Aaron.
Oh, that was my fault, Aaron. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Aaron.
So the GCC points you were making are great points. I mean, the GCC is a really powerful economic union, more than anything else. And they've done over 10,000 M&A transactions for over $2 trillion, and in the last 25 years, and they float tons of stocks on their stock market. They're it's a fantastic economic union, right? I mean, that's really the heart of it. And but as a military union, that's just not its function, really, and as a capability. And to kind of Ken's points that he was trying to make about this
No, I just want to say, theoretically, what would Patton do?
Well, Patton wouldn't do anything because Patton wouldn't be in charge of some operation like this. That's the point, is that,
He'd walk off, he'd stay home. He'd say, I don't want to play.
Iran is. So logistically, where Iran is, this is number one, it's a absolutely, historically difficult place to go fight. Right? I mean, I would probably put it on the same boundaries.
As the director of finance, I'm managing 15 and
I'd probably put it in the same parlance as the CBI, right? I mean, it's just going to be, it's a train wreck to get forces there, to get logistics there, to establish. It's got a 1,200-mile coast. I mean, you're fighting like 9 wars as part of your whole op plan, right? I mean, so we developed all these op plans, right? Like OPLAN. And we had one called Oplan 1025, which was configured for a conflict with Iran, and we had different different levels. If it was a blockade and like we're dealing with now, or like we dealt with in the 80s, that's different than a full invasion. We don't have the military combat power and the sustainment to invade and transform Iran. Right. Do we have the combat power to destroy Iran? Basically, like war crimes level? Sure. Yeah, we have that. I doubt that's what most people would agree is would be the approach that you would take. There's also, and this is the thing, Ken, you and others have to come to terms with. This is the first conflict in our history that hasn't been sold to its people. And it's one thing that you didn't sell Grenada, okay, fine, or Haiti or something, right? Those are like police actions, really. We're talking about an ahistorical conflict that is, at the really arguably at the highest levels of kinetic warfare. And we've normalized, we've accepted this sort of MAGA world view that they can just do anything they want politically, and no matter how ahistorical it is, that you could just decide to go to total war with Iran, spend trillions of dollars, and do large-scale kinetic conflict that will likely lead to thousands to tens of thousands of casualties, and not have to sell that to the American people. And I believe it's traitorous at this point. And I believe the people who believe in that are. I mean, I'm dead serious about this at this point, because if the country is really not a country, it's a constitutional republic, like from the people. Well, and you're talking about being able to commit $1 trillion level war, which is basically the biggest war you can commit. That's Russia's war in Ukraine, and what China's would be in Taiwan, and what this would be in Iran if we did it. I mean, then what do you have, right? I mean, that's not a normalized state anymore, not in a democratic way. And I think people should have to answer for that. I think people who support this should have to answer for that.
Yeah.
And the problem is now we're stuck, right? So we have the sunk cost fallacy now. So yeah, there's no kinetic windup here that gets you to regime change. And by the way, do you really want regime change? You really want to blow this place up with 10 million people migrating out of the place, with warlordism taking over? Because that's what you're going to get. Because that's what you always get. And so, people should have to answer for that. Right. And so this sort of kinetic windup, and it's great when we talk about, okay, Israel can conduct certain kind of operations in Lebanon, and they're near abroad, but Israel is not an expeditionary power, right? They cannot move 50,000 troops by themselves across 1,000 or 2,000 miles. That they don't have that capability. I mean, could they jerry rig cargo ships and put some toothpick, Band-Aid, 100-mile-an-hour tape, transport Navy together to move 5 or 10,000? Probably. They could probably do that, but they couldn't move corps, right? They don't have that capability. And, a couple, I'm sorry, a couple thousand Israeli and a couple thousand or US JSOCs running around Iran is not changing the regime. It's just not. And so I mean, this is a fool's errand as that's ever been constructed. And everyone that thought this thing was going to be regime change is living in Fantasy Island. Iran is 25% of the territory of the United States, and 28% of its our population. And it's got a super city like the greater New York metro area. Okay, how you doing that one? I mean, imagine like reverse it, like JSOC and some brigades invade the East Coast.
Yeah.
How does that go down?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's pretty nuts. It's clearly well, and one thing I'm worried about that he's going to pull some shit that's going to be equivalent to January 6th in terms of the midterms. That's my worst fear. And then what are people going to do about that? If he actually flaunts the Constitution in such a basic way where he deserves to have people go out in the street and revolt.
Well, I mean, look, the scariest thing he could do at some point is he could just scream, you know, patriots were being, taken over by the deep state, blah, 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 whatever, and fight back. So I want all of you, to come to DC,
right.
Immediately get on your trucks, bring your gear, bring your weapons, whatever, and go. And and then I'll stand down the guard, I'll stand down federal forces. I mean, what's the Capitol Police and DCPD going to do? Right? I mean, objectively, right? They're not going to get into a gunfight with 50, 100,000 people showing up in the Capitol.
Right.
Right. And then what are you going to do with Congress at that point?
Right.
I mean, you're going to put them underground in the nuclear bunker.
Right.
I mean, and also let's be real, like you're forcing decisions by people, the Secret Service, to make a call. Who are they? Like where's their allegiance? I mean, things get pretty real pretty fast.
Right. Well, that would be that he would essentially be creating a situation like the Civil War. Anyway,
yeah, it's a Civil War kind of coup d'etat. It's like,
exactly.
if McClellan could have gotten his wish, basically, So yeah, I mean, I think I don't put that as high probability, but I never would have had it above zero until
January
the last
6th.
year and a half. So
yeah, well, January 6th changed everything. I mean, here they actually plotted this. It's just and then they got away with it.
Well, by the way, and my belief is that, and I really do believe this, if something like that ever happened again, they would not wait for the January 6th transition. It would start happening in October, and then you could attempt to use the Insurrection Act before before the election, and you could attempt to do, you could attempt to do some funky things around the election and ballots and control, and that's you. So it would be much more, I believe, of an October, November event, because it gives you a lot more runway. Right. The problem with it happening in January is, you are seating a new Congress, and that's a kind of a seismic escalation. If you really do, if you attack that, is different than if you attack the process 2 months earlier. It just gives you more time, because you could go into some kind of insurrection, probably try to pull some of the Lincoln memorandums during the Civil War. You'd get some funky. You can try to get some really funky plays there. I don't know if it really works, but that's what I think they would probably try to do. They would try to do it earlier than Jan 6.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm trying to get some of the journalists on who actually are talking about this. Go on, Tristan.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So I'm again going to have to agree with Aaron that going back to Ken's question about what would it take for an invasion of Iran to succeed, and I honestly don't think that it's politically possible.
Right.
The U.S. population is sort of, from my understanding, is sort of deeply scarred from the global war on terror, and like the last thing that they want is to be back in the Middle East, sort of fighting wars with no sort of realistic end goal, right? And and on top of the political aspect, I'm not really certain that it's militarily possible for the U.S. to successfully conduct an invasion of Iran. The there have like the carrier groups that are in the area already have not proven sufficient to coerce Iran into reopening the straits and all this stuff. And it would be even worse with the ground invasion, I think, because like the Iranians are not and with the caveat that the US seemingly would have air dominance. But the Iranians are not sort of a rinky-dink outfit like the Iraqis or the Taliban. Right, like the U.S. are like they're going to be in for a real fight if they wanted to do a ground invasion, and interestingly, so here in Montreal, recently, thanks to Dr. Schofield, we had the opportunity to host Major Rob Rose, who's the head of research at West Point, and he said a lot of interesting things. And one thing that I really picked up on from the conversation with him was that the the U.S. Strategic stockpiles are no longer sufficient for the the global environment that we find ourselves in now. And so I don't think it's possible for the US at this point to conduct a successful invasion of Iran whatsoever. Or
Yeah,
at least if they're like if they have any like strategic goals beyond wipe out the population, that is.
I tend to agree with you. I mean, the amount of force that would be needed is just much too much. I mean, you'd have to mobilize, first of all, the entire regular army. You'd have to use, it looks, I mean, I don't know if you've actually war gamed that up in Montreal, but to me, it would be, I guess I would take the Gulf Strike game and then play around. Yeah, go, you gonna say something, Tristan? Something?
Yeah, sorry. Just one thing I forgot to mention. And another like really important factor is that if the U.S. were to invade Iran, they'd essentially be going it alone, right? Like, um, the European sort of NATO region has
Absolutely.
absolutely zero interest in what's going on in the Middle East, right? They're all concerned about what's happening in Ukraine. Um, the America's sort of Atlantic partners are also sort of not really that interested in Iran because they're concerned about China. So, and here in Canada, we don't even have the capacity to help, in an invasion of Iran. So like it would be the US going it alone, which is an important factor, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and how would they use Israel? How would they use Israel? Would they use Israeli troops? I mean, that would be to me politically quite uh, negative on the part of the United States to actually go into combat with the IDF in Iran, invading Iran. I mean, and again, the necessity of manpower you'd need is of a dimension. I mean, hell, in Vietnam, the population was not 90 million in the South. And there you're talking about invading a country. What was the population of Iraq? About 25 million, if I recall. It was nothing like this.
Yeah,
Uh,
Iran is over 3 times the size of Iraq,
okay, so
population wise.
you got
Yeah.
30, you got 30 million versus 90 million. The whole thing is crazy. And what did they seize Iraq with? Basically, 4 divisions, 5 divisions. Well, you need a hell of a lot more to do that in Iran. You'd need 10 to 12 divisions easily, and even then you're in a problematic situation. I mean, what are you gaining from it?
Well, and by the way, that's just a thunder run to
Yeah.
Iran. If you're talking about administrating,
Oh yeah, forget
I
about
mean,
it.
it's like 30 divisions. I mean, it doesn't exist.
No, I mean, I would imagine that if they were actually ruling out options, that this option would have been analyzed and ruled out. But go on, Tristan. Mike, just jump in when you want, man.
I don't think that I don't think that there, like in the case where there was an invasion of Iran, I don't think it would be reasonable to expect that Israel would be sending any significant ground forces. They're already tied up pretty tightly dealing with their immediate area, and sort of a trend throughout all of this is that, you know, Israel's been sitting back more or less while the U.S. does their dirty work. So I don't think Israel would even be a factor, aside from, you know, Iran trying to strike some, like, their, you know, population centers or energy infrastructure or whatever. Like I don't think they would play any significant role in an invasion of Iran.
Well, I also think that Trump does not. Well, remember, Trump wanted actually to seize the oil facilities, the export facilities of Iran, and then use it to make money. And that aspect of the Trump foreign policy. I mean, Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner, of course, benefited financially from his association with the Abraham Accords and all that. But well, hold on, Aaron. Michael, do you want to unmute Mike? Michael,
Yeah. Well,
want to jump in with your opinions about this? We're talking about.
first of all, I think that Israel could get involved, if I can use the World War II correlation, in commando-style operations. They're not going to send a massive force, but they can do commando-style raids on certain areas, which might relieve the U.S. in some respect, and also with air power. But you're having a conversation apparently about a ground invasion. Is that in the offing? Is somebody actually talking about that? Because I do agree that if you put boots on the ground and you're not just going for a temporary raid, so to speak, going in and taking out some insulation facility or something like that, or getting people out of there or something, or doing something to help, forces within Iran rise up or something. Well, then that would just be more intelligence operations. But the fact is, yeah, I mean, it's a big country. You got to occupy it. And again, there's no occupation plan, just like there wasn't in Iraq. In World War II, starting in 1942, they were already planning what they were going to be doing for the occupation of Germany and Japan. So I don't see who's talking about a ground invasion? I mean, has anybody, aside from this show, has anybody in Washington or anywhere been talking about a ground invasion? I mean, a full-scale ground invasion, not a raid. But if you want to occupy a particular area of Iran that you have a logistical attachment to, that you can get logistics to, maybe that's possible. That's what Israel did in Lebanon. But to occupy the entire country, to go in there and take over the country, I didn't know are people talking about that now? Seriously?
Mike, I just brought it up for discussion purposes because everybody's talking about let's have an amicable resolution here where nobody, the only thing you're going to get in a mediation is both parties don't get everything they want, but they're satisfied. They got something, all of that. Let's shake hands and make friends. But okay, but somebody's got to chart out all potential actions. Now, there was an 8-year war between Iraq and Iran. So somebody got the attitude, I don't want to use any foul terms, somebody had the viewpoint that they could win. They could go in and conquer them. And that was the maniacs in Iraq, okay? Or maybe it was started by the maniacs in Iran. But there was a ground effort going back and forth between Iran and Iraq. And it got the most famous quote from the guy who is the Secretary of State for Bush, or
George Schultz for Reagan.
No. I'm talking about the one that everybody hates with the German accent. I can't remember his name. He says that they're fighting. What could be better?
You're talking
Iraq's fighting Iran.
You're talking about Kissinger.
Kissinger, right? That's what he said. Oh, quiet. Don't mention it. Don't talk. Let him go. So I mean, the idea of a on the ground conflict or a major conflict, if this was done in Hollywood, somebody would come up and say, the mad guys, we're going to expose, we're going to fire off a nuclear above Iran, and that's going to an electromagnetic pulse that's going to put out all of their equipment, and that will be cover them with sleeping gas and come in like in Wings Over the World in the 1920s, that movie. And then we'll come in and we'll get rid of the bad guys, and we'll come in and we'll have somebody like the guy from Friends in Your Neighborhood type, a very nice, peaceful, come in and everybody calm down, and we'll deprogram them and make it into a sane
do all
country.
that, Ken? How do you do all that deprogramming?
Well, just do it. You don't. That's not a problem getting it done. There's lots of social workers that have lost their jobs because the DEI was canceled, so they're just floating around now. So you could give them, give them a 3 case studies. You could just handle 5 people in Iran. We could take it. I'm just saying, if you don't take anything off the table, if you look at all potential things.
So Ken, if we do all potential things, then why don't you fly over
just to look at it? I agree. It's not a right thing.
Why don't you fly over to Turkey and then walk naked across the border into Iraq? Right. And that's all potential things.
That's another potential thing. That's right. Yeah. What's Turkey doing in this? What side are they on?
What are the Arab states? They're on Turkey's side, like they always are.
Okay, so all these nations, these Arab nations surrounding Iran, are suffering because Iran attacked them. Iran attacked them.
Turkey is not an Arab nation.
I know, but the local Middle Eastern nations, whether they're Turkish or Arabic or Caucasians like Iran is, Iran attacked all of the local countries. It says, if you don't come, if you're not on my side, you're against me. I'm going to send some missiles over.
Yeah.
They can't be happy about it. They're having a problem. They can't get their oil out.
Sure, but they're not going to go sacrifice a generation of their kids.
Oh, they're just because they gotten used to our doing it. Well, anyhow.
Well, hey, do you? So how many under 30-year-olds do you know in your family?
Oh, well, I don't know. I'm not exactly how large my family is because
I'm just wondering.
Wayward youth. I don't know what happened.
Is it 5 or 10 people under 30 in
your family? No. Don't make a case to me why we shouldn't go to war. I'm not saying we should go to war.
No, but Ken,
I'm just saying it doesn't matter what the American people think. They don't run the country immediately. They run the country slowly over polls and elections. Immediately, the country is run by the administration and by corporations. You know that.
No.
What the people think is manipulated by the media. You know that.
Ken, nobody starts. That's why it's never happened. Nobody starts a 1,000,000-man war because of corporations and an executive. That's
why did we get involved?
Shit, dude.
Why do we get involved in Korea? What the fuck was that?
Korea was it was a strategic action because basically North Korea with Chinese support took over the southern part of Korea and broke the agreements that we had at the end of World War II. So
this kind of crap happens every day in the world.
No, it does not happen every day.
Did the public support it before that occurred? Did the public support it?
How could the public how do we create a simulation of potential support for potential actions in the future? The real world doesn't work like that.
Okay, great. But I'm just saying, to come up and say the American people won't put up with it, when it finds out eventually, that's correct. But in the meantime, I'm not saying that.
Ken, you can't hide trillions in spending. And
you're just arguing with me that you can't do it. And you're saying it can't be done. Dude, that's ridiculous.
Can I finish? You can't hide trillions in new defense spending that you would need to have, plus calling up millions of Americans that are not on active duty. You can't hide that.
Yeah. So what?
It's not yeah. So what? You're talking. So
what prevents us from doing it? What prevents us from going to war? What prevents the administration from calling
going
out
to
the troops,
going
going
hold
to
on,
war
Ken.
in Iran?
Ken, from going to total large scale war in Iran?
Yeah, what prevents them?
What prevents them is people will not. You'll have to start arresting reservists and National Guard members who would then be called up in mass. That you would be, because you'd be calling up all the National Guard and all the reserves, Air Force, Army, Navy, which isn't large, the Navy, Marine Corps. And by the way, that you're taking police off the streets, you're taking EMTs off the streets, taking firemen off the streets. So, it'd be a complete nightmare because you're taking about out of the 1.5 million people you'd be calling up.
Germany did it, didn't they?
I'm sorry?
Germany, World War II. Did they do that?
Germany was a fascist state.
Fine. Why didn't the German people stop them?
So let's all, look, guys, I have a great idea. Next week, let's all get tickets to go to Istanbul, take a bus to the border of Iran and walk across naked. I mean, we're just making up totally random. I mean, Napoleon did it too. So did Caesar. So did, we're just going to throw shit out there. I mean, we live in 2026, the real world in front of us. You aren't calling up 1.5 million Americans. And you'd be calling up IRR also. So, I mean, you would have literally a revolt by people who you'd be calling up to begin with.
So, okay. So just given that there's a potential 1 in 1,000 chance that this could occur, the active public should get active now to stop it.
Well, no, because I think the probability of that, I mean, it's like you put your energy based on risk and probability. I think this is a low probability event. So I don't think you'd be putting, I don't think you could activate a lot of people to run around the streets every day saying, don't do this. I don't think that probably works.
Well, could I just interject here, because only for the reason that I was the one originally talking.
Yes, you were.
Go ahead.
Well, we can look at Vietnam as an example, in which hundreds of thousands of Americans, put it this way, a distinct percentage of the population, not nearly as big as World War II, but a lot of guys were sent over. It was an unpopular war. Of course, we know how Vietnam turned out, but that's another matter. It can be done, but the point is, I don't see it being done here. I mean, the fact of the matter is, we don't even know what the point of this war. I mean, we might have an idea that the Israelis had a more limited objective in mind, but we don't even know what the U.S. objective is. What is the U.S. objective?
100% right.
I mean, if we're, in other words, if it's just to take over the country, then that's going to be it's going to be a long haul. Let's put it that way. Can it be done? Yeah, but it's going to be a long haul, and it's going to require a massive effort, and it's going to be something along the lines possibly of Vietnam, or at least Vietnam as of Lyndon Johnson.
Well, I think it's way bigger than Vietnam, actually.
I don't know about that, but the fact is, I don't know if it's way bigger than Vietnam. But the problem is, Vietnam was very problematic at home, obviously.
Of course.
And it didn't turn out well. So the fact of the matter is, if you don't have a clear objective, I mean, even in Korea, the United States and the UN forces actually had two different purposes of the UN action. And it was a UN action, even though it was predominantly US as far as deployment, etc. It was a UN action, but the UN, the idea was to get the North Koreans out of South Korea. Now, the U.S. under MacArthur, when MacArthur was in command of the troops, had another or an additional objective, which is to get North Korea out of North Korea. Or the North Korean regime, and possibly go into China. Who knows what MacArthur was actually thinking? But the idea is that all of this, I don't think it's not something that would be on the table right now. First of all, the U.S. isn't prepared for it, and second of all, the objective isn't clear. And if you don't have a clear objective, it's like what was that line from the movie Go Tell the Spartans? And then it's a sucker's tour. I think Trump, the reason there is no clear objective on the part of the U.S. is so that Trump can declare victory no matter what happens. Well, we achieved our objective. What was your objective? I don't know. But whatever
the objective will be whatever he says the day he says we won.
It's over. Exactly. So the fact is, but he keeps on saying different things. First it was regime change. Now it's then it was just to get rid of their nuclear capabilities. Then it has to do with the Straits, etc. I don't know. I when this ends, I think the idea is that Iran, which is not even coming to the table anymore, the idea is to get them to make concessions on their nuclear program and on their missile capabilities. Basically, to take them off the table as a potential threat. That's basically the objective. And Iran is probably looking at it like more of a self-defense issue. And Iran, by the way, is a totalitarian regime. It's not a free country. It's not a democracy. Well, it is a democracy, but not a free and open democracy. The idea is that I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. The fact of the matter is, Iran is probably going to have to make some concessions, or this is just going to go on. And the United States is going to have to decide when is enough. When is enough enough? When have they achieved enough? And they're going to stop. And neither of those things are on the table right now.
All right. Before I bring Alex in, first of all, the Vietnam War analogy is, if they've been making it in this situation, and again, I only draw on what we publicly know Trump actually has said when he was president the first time, and then what he said since he became president. Now, we don't really know, because we don't have the documents, we don't have a WikiLeaks source, we don't have somebody sitting there leaking all this stuff to us. We don't really know what these guys are actually talking about and planning and thinking. All I do know is that concretely, when the air campaign did not succeed in toppling the regime the first week, let's send the MEU from San Diego. Let's send the MEU from, the other MEU came from from the Caribbean. And then, I guess by the third week, they're talking about the Ready Brigade of the 2nd. And then supposedly they've sent more troops in the past 2 weeks. So who knows let's say they have a division or 2 divisions of troops there. And they're planning on however they're going to use them, etc. It's still inadequate in terms of posing a concrete conventional military threat to Iran. Now, what is a threat to Iran is having Israeli and American air power reign supreme over the country. And that's where these guys probably, I would think the people in the Air Force, the people who were planning this air campaign, in the back of their brains, because I'm thinking, I haven't read Colonel Warden's book in a long time. Warden, of course, was the big guru during the Gulf War, and he actually argued that an air campaign could topple the regime. And so they now have, unlike the Gulf War, when I think about 10% of the ordnance was PGMs, now they can go in and use PGMs completely. And then when they use iron bombs with the B-52s, they're doing it with little to no air threat. So you're talking about a very different situation, which I would think that the air staff people and the air power advocates within the military planners and the Joint Chiefs might think that they can do the kind of consequences I showed with the effect on the economy and actually destroy it. Actually have the people from below rebel because they're going to cry uncle. I mean, that could be what Trump is thinking of. But what's, to me, countering that is the global economic effect of this, which just keeps on multiplying. And I can't think that Trump is so politically tunnel driven that, because he'll argue, oh, well, the whole thing is to be solved because they're a nuclear threat. Okay. Now, if I was the Iranians, I would definitely want to get nuclear weapons after this attack. I would double time that effort. And I've looked at, there's a very good Google good ISS, good ISIS. And what that is a study based on remember the Israelis went and raided that nuclear warehouse in Tehran and took all the documents. This study is a study of the Iranian nuclear weapons development based on these guys going into Israel and looking at the documents that they supposedly were stolen. Now, again, the veracity of all that, is it disinformation? Okay, legitimate questions. You have to read a lot of other books about Iranian nuclear capability and planning to sort of make up your own judgment about that. However, there's no doubt in my mind that it's going to be very difficult for a third world country, after watching what just happened to Iran, to not want to acquire nuclear weapons of its own to deter a possible attack by conventional forces like what's going on right now with Israel and the United States. Go on, Aaron. Alex, go on.
Yeah, again, I don't know if Jim had mentioned, I'm going to share something from, oh, sorry. Okay, from
what?
Telegram today. Here, are you guys seeing this? Let me pull this out. This is from CNN reporting here. Again, I don't know if you guys mentioned this again, that they reported today. I guess somebody leaked this, that the U.S., if we were to resume the war, we're a serious risk of running out of missiles. And again, basically taking it down to the point where we couldn't fight another war like against China. So here again are this is within the article. We use 45% of our, I guess this is like the JASSMs, mostly 50% of THAAD interceptors, 50% of, I guess that's PAC-3s probably. And again, use 20 to 30% of Tomahawk and other long-range missiles. But here again, they're again, I guess the internal report says that, if we had to fight China, we might. So there's a window of vulnerability. So we got to think in those terms, of course, wait, I just want to, wait, let me, so again, there's that obviously in mind. Can I bring the window up? I just want to end this share. Wait, sorry, give me a sec, guys, to figure this out. Or you can't, I think I know. Is it this? Shit. Oh, wait, okay. Stop sharing. Okay, there we go. Sorry. I guess it's a new Zoom interface. So beyond that, of course, again, so obviously that's something that they're thinking about seriously again, that, and I think that's a lot of that is behind. Also, again, Trump thinking like, well, if we do resume the war again, well, what am I going to hit? Because again, it's quite clear, again, a lot of the stuff that Iran has is like underground and hard to get at, and that they're, digging it out right now, essentially. And again, I think was it I don't know if it was I forget if we've seen that. Somebody again put out a report saying again that I think about it at the Times, yeah, saying that actually again their estimate is like um, Iran has 60% of their missiles left. So again, all that stuff about we destroyed 90%, 80%, 70% is, total hogwash, as, we might expect as bluster from Trump. So yeah, so and of course that's they made a point again at the Times that, that's not counting the stuff that's like, was like buried by our attacks. And basically they just have to dig out, like they're pointing out that like, yeah, you just basically like, bomb one of these silos, and all the Iranians have to do basically is dig it out and they can use it again. So there's yeah. So and again there's a good Rusi had a good article like late in the war again like I know somewhere around like day 30 or something. I think I said it to some of you guys anyway. That again was doing the calculation was like, oh yeah, we're at the current rate of expenditure, all the interceptors are going to run out by May, if not, and some are going to run out in April. And again, the precision attack missiles would run out by about then too. So again, they're still on, we're not producing many of these a year. And again, they just get kind of like we've seen in the Ukraine war, all this ammunition gets and missiles get used at such a prodigious rate. And Jim and Mike and Aaron can remember again for those of us and Julian probably too, like, those of us can remember from like war, discussing like a potential NATO Warsaw Pact war in the 80s, that they were like, everybody was quite clear again, okay, they're going to run out of, weapons like after a month or so. That, even with the huge stock, and again, NATO back then and the US had much, um, a, a few months ago, I just checked out again to see again what were like the DoD documents about like, yeah, our ammunition production, like, yeah, like back during the classic Cold War, essentially. And again, the ability of the US, like the number of like ammunition plants we had back in the 80s is like expansion of, is like 5 or 6 times what we have now. And again, and basically they can produce like, I think 2 million shells, something like that, again, of different types, for example, in a year. So that, that truly massive, we had truly massive industrial capacity. And even then, they're like, okay, in a month or two, basically, because of, they're going to be firing tens of thousands of rounds per day, actually probably much more than they're firing in the Ukraine, because, there are going to be like, millions of troops basically on both sides, shooting it out from Norway to Turkey. And yeah, and I can sure again, yeah, Jim and Mike and you guys remember this again. I was like, I think it was literally like a month. Basically, we would be out of ammo in a month, and it'll be like again what happened in World War One, like after the initial clashes, where again there was like the shell shortage in 1915, and then they had to totally like revamp, essentially to go to total war production, and it took like several months before again, yeah, either side could, had the number of shells that they wanted. And then, yeah, so we're going to have that kind of situation. So again, this is, they're just, they're military constraints on Trump. But and like Jim said, there's the long-term economic stuff that's going to start to pile up. You know, I mean, Michael Hudson just did a very good video that I sent to Jim, about how, essentially we've been in our whole economy is a Ponzi scheme since 2008 because of basically low, we went to negative interest rates, which made it so that basically every bank, they borrow money from the Fed at negative cost. Again, they actually got paid by the Federal Reserve to borrow money. So it's basically free money for them. And they, of course, basically they've done all these, they built up all these multiple bubbles from, auto debt to AI to everything. And essentially everything's a house of cards. And it's only a matter of time before, somebody pulls the cards out of the deck, the whole thing collapses. And, we're just, where we were in 2008 with, massive financial crisis. Again, the thing is probably going to be AI now, because again, AI is very energy intensive in its requirements. And, already we basically can't build enough new power plants in the US for all the data centers. And so that's why, again, the cost of electricity is going up in a lot of places around the country.
Right.
Where, yeah. But
Right.
again, that's all going to come to, to a
Right.
head, and we're probably going to see at least a major recession, if not again, I mean,
Oh,
the Dr. Hudson was talking about again, we're facing a deflation. Basically, his alt nightmare scenario is basically, as the lack of oil becomes a problem, and different businesses around the world essentially start shutting down, they're not making stuff. Then they put their workers are out, are out there, can't buy things. And then okay, so then more businesses, start going under, and in South Korea or Japan or Indonesia or here. And basically, again, it's what happened in our Great Depression. Then again, investment collapses, and then there's less. Yeah, the economy goes down, and then basically that means more, less into the economy, and basically more businesses go under the whole thing again, and you have a deflation of your currency, and that's again where he sees us going. And again, he predicted 2008 right on the money. So
all right. All right. Let me
he's been
just
right before.
point out that this is the study done by CSIS that the CNN article is based on. Last round status of key munitions, and what it does go through in detail is the estimated pre-war inventories. You can go there and see your own calculations of what they're saying they estimate is being used right now in the present situation. It's a pretty extensive article, and it's done with Mark Kansian, who actually is a pretty nice guy. I haven't talked to Mark in many years. I don't think he's at the Defense Department. He was at the Defense Department, but he's sort of at the, oh yeah, he's at the CSIS Defense Department. Now I'm going to just say to Michael and Alex, I had a long meeting today with Patrick Coors. He's in New York. And as I mentioned to the guys earlier, I was also at a seminar with Adam Tooze. And Adam was very interested in what we were doing. And basically, Patrick is going to try to persuade him to join us. And Adam was very interested in the idea of taking the strategic conference documents at the JCS and essentially critically reading them. Like, as if you're reading Shakespeare, except as what we were thinking about doing.
Right, yeah.
Simply do the shit that we did when we were I don't want to go back to
during COVID, yeah.
I don't want to go to Arcadia. I don't want to go to Argentina. We did all that.
Yeah.
We did all the pre-war stuff before Pearl Harbor. And I believe we did everything throughout 1942 in detail. So I just as soon go straight to Casablanca, because that's when the action starts. That's when it gets even more crazy. And one can go into all sorts of different directions with that document, because you can go off into every part of the war, frankly. So that could be a real interesting situation to start having Adam come on once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue it'll be equivalent to when we had Roy come in from UAE.
Mm-hmm.
And Patrick wants to do things regularly. He'd like to have we were talking today about actually doing a discussion about the issue of the Weimar analogy. Because remember, he's German. He's right now in the middle of finishing his book, the second book, which is on the global order through World War II into the 1960s. And we had a long discussion about this. I mean, I disagree with some of Patrick's attention. I think it's like a lot of these guys, when you're doing international history, how much can you really do? Because, you're not necessarily intimately familiar with African history. You're not intimately familiar with Asian history. Adam himself admitted today that he really underestimated Chinese history. He didn't know much about Chinese history in 1989. And now he does. And now he's paying a lot of attention to it, which of course I think with those of us here who've been involved in, certainly at NIMAS, we've been
Right.
concerned with China, with Asian history from the get-go.
And
So
what's Patrick knowledge of Middle Eastern stuff?
he was at Oxford and worked
Uh,
with Avi Shlaim. So
okay.
Avi and
Okay. So,
friends.
but obviously, well, then Latin
In,
America would be another area you might
Latin
be.
America, the friend of mine who is teaching at Columbia, the problem with Alfonso is I don't necessarily want to put Alfonso in a situation where
Right. Yeah.
ICE assholes can go fuck with him because he's not an American. But Alfonso would be very good for us to talk about, perhaps in a way where we're not recording him.
Hmm.
I could say, Alfonso, let's talk about contemporary stuff, and we're not going to record you. We're not going to post it. I think that'd be very, because Alfonso knows his shit about Latin American history in the 19th and 20th century. That's his thing. That's what he teaches, and he would be very interesting. I did ask him to talk about the Haitian Revolution and
Yeah,
also
that would be fun.
the issue of the Latin American revolutions against the Spanish, and how one can interrelate that to the revolution.
Oh,
Um,
actually, if
but
you want to do that, Jim, I got a friend from the grad center, Alejandro, who his area is early Mexican, like independence movement and revolution in like the 1820s.
oh, really? Well, that'd be
He'll get.
interesting.
I haven't
That
taught. He teaches at St. John's.
okay? That'd be very interesting
Yeah.
to get somebody like that. Um, and then I got the Porch books, and I'm gonna get Kevin Pasmore. I'm gonna email him and have him come talk to us about the Maginot Line, and I'm gonna have this guy at Penn talk about Russia. I'm going to do a whole bunch of more. I'm going to definitely focus in on this present mess we're in, because and have all different perspectives. Okay, I'm not going to be exclusive. I'm going to have that professor from the Cal system who did this sort of lefty history of Iran, and then I'm going to get Mansour Farhang. I asked Mansour to come and talk, and Mansour was the first appointed ambassador after the revolution to the United States. And then he just defected. He said, "Fuck that shit." He said, I'm not gonna that's when the Iranian Revolution, of course, was eating up the secularists, and they were going after them and suppressing them. So I'll bring him into the picture. But anyway, um, Kenny, is there any other things you wanted to talk about tonight? Anything else you wanted to focus in on?
Nope. No, not really.
All
Or
right.
or Julian. I don't know if he said
Oh,
anything.
Julian's been jabbering away for a long time here.
Okay.
Yeah, I apologize. No, I was doing some logistics. I found the discussion absolutely fascinating. But one rule of the balance of power is the longer Trump waits, the greater risk there is that Iran is going to learn to fight, and Iran is going to get an ally. So
Right.
he, I think I respect the long-term strategy of wearing the Iranians down, but it's super risky.
Mhm.
If you look at linebacker 2, the U.S. lost 6 B-52s in one day because the North Vietnamese had evolved to figuring out how to use SA-2s at high altitude. Iran's number of STEM degrees in its population is much higher than Vietnam. So if Trump wants to do something, he should do it soon.
Well, see, linebacker two. See, then I would then recommend, look, the CIA, the best source of looking at what happened to the DRV during the bombing campaigns was all the stuff the CIA did. It's all declassified. And all the CIA studies did, there was a big argument within the defense establishment over what the effect of Rolling Thunder was. And because it wasn't as if they didn't bomb the shit out of him, they did. And the effect was that it didn't necessarily, because of the Chinese and Russian support, seriously hamper their ability to sustain the insurgency in the South. Now, that's the problem with everything that Trump to make a comment. As I said earlier, you missed it, Alex and Michael. He basically said he could have won the Vietnam War, which
Oh no, I heard all that. Yeah,
stupid
which is
fucking
absurd.
made this week, and quite amazing, quite amazing.
Well, I
And,
mean, it's nothing you hadn't heard from like Mark
Forget,
Moyer with a
forget
lot
what
more
Trump
intelligence
says.
behind it. But
Guys, forget what Trump says. Okay, Trump talks shit. Okay, we know that.
right, he talks shit.
What is he doing? What are they doing? What is
Well,
this administration
let's
doing?
see. And see, the other thing about this is that, I was just made a quick calculation about what would be theoretically the kind of insurgent force a special forces group could actually sustain. Now, they are theoretically set up to command 81,000 troops, a special forces group. Okay? Because each ODA is theoretically the cadre. They're basically trained to lead a 1,000 to 1,500 man battalion. That's what they're essentially ideal a guerrilla, a Maquis, a partisan warfare battalion. Now, none of this. I would be interested to find out what actually happened with their whole idea to send money to the Kurds, because we heard that in the first 2 or 3 weeks of this mess. We haven't heard much about that ever since. And then what's really going on in the covert action programs inside Iran with the Baluchis, with the Kurds? What's happening? We don't really know. And again, they haven't fragmented the military. See, that the whole thing to me, when I listened to, I was with a bunch of people at the Middle East seminar. 2 or 3 of them these guys are married to women who are big supporters of the Shah. And they were giving me a whole lot of shit. And I said, well, wait a second. Okay, where do you get this 15, 20%? Oh, everybody knows that. I said, well, wait, come on. Who knows this? I mean, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm wrong. But where is it demonstrated in fact? And they couldn't answer that one. It's, glibly assumed that oh yeah, 6 or 7 years ago, if the United States had done this, there would have been this national unity, maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Because I mentioned to them, I interviewed all these Iranian filmmakers at the Tribeca Film Festival in 2008. I concentrated on them. I did TV shows on each of them because I was so fascinated. We took them out to dinner in Lower Manhattan, and they were great people. They said, look, we hate the fucking regime, but if the United States decides to invade us, we're going to fight for Iran. They made it clear. So again, what's the situation now? And again, do I have, it's sort of it's unclear when I read the the anti-regime newsletters here. What am I getting? Am I getting, am I getting an accurate assessment or not? All that stuff in Southern California, these guys create. Go on, Aaron. What are you going to say?
Yeah. So there's a couple of points I think that are that might be important. Is that you can't look at the Kurds as sort of one contiguous, and that obviously, Joe. Well, one contiguous political a set of groupings. They're pretty.
Oh yeah.
They're radically. I mean, they're arguably as diverse as we are, politically, and especially within their own, and then there's a group, the ones that are the anti-Iranian ones are actually Alex would be good friends with them because they're actually hardcore Marxists and I mean like real ones, right? Like not like not latte.
Well, no, there always was the two-day party was an important force going back to Mossadegh and before Mossadegh.
Exactly. So
there's been a communist movement in Iran for a long time.
And so those Kurds, those Marxist Kurds were always had like a triple whammy against them, right? Because what do you call it? Number one, they're Kurdish. Number two, they were Marxists, and number three, arguably even kind of more important, is that they were from there's a province called Kurdistan actually in Iran. A lot of people don't know, and like so like West Azerbaijan, Kurdistan, and a Karimashah. Those are like the three far western provinces where the Kurds live, and those provinces, that's like Appalachia times 10 inside like the Iranian, um, you know, uh, uh, modern society, right? Because Iran, especially Tehran, the greater Tehran is a, massive, it's like LA, New York put together kind of in Iran. And, and they view those people as like weird people from the sticks. But then on top of it, they're Kurds. And then there's a fourth whammy in that they're not either Muslim or what you would call sort of Muslim secular, right? The way like Jewish secular or Catholic secular people will be in the United States, right? Like a lot of people, my friends here that are from Iran, they're all basically sort of what you'd call secular Muslims, right? I mean, they'll a few times a year they'll check a few boxes. The rest of the time they're just secular, and so Kurds were I mean, they're like third class citizens. So the idea that the regular, like the regular Peshmerga from the northern Iraq side are going to work with them, they never worked with them, right? Primarily because of, well, going back, decades, the Soviet support that they had, and they were also anti-Iranian regime. The Turks obviously looked with the Iranians to liquidate them literally. So it's you're just not going to, there's not much juice in that squeeze with them, and they're so far out there. I mean, that what are you doing really flipping that province, right? It's almost like it's like a ferret victory, really. So and the Baluchi, the whole Baluchi Pakistan thing, like I just do not see Pakistan wanting to fight a two-front war between India and Iran right now. I just don't think they want to sign up for that. So I think that one doesn't really make sense. So I think it's been a fool's errand believing that we're going to put, 5 SF groups into, I'm making fun of this, Jim, for you, but 5 SF groups with 260 A teams launching a Star Wars level galactic clone army across Iran. Like that just ain't happening. And with that means we're stuck back in the same dilemma, which I agree with Julian. The longer this goes, the more the Iranians kind of get into a better OTA loop. The other thing and I do think this is the most important aspect to this whole conflict, is the Iranians, their coastal defense forces were their lowest tier forces in the whole regime. So my friend's dad, or my friend's uncle, was a member of that force in the 80s and 90s, kind of during his military service, late 80s and early 90s. And they were treated like Coast Guard reserves. I mean, they were just barely military, right? And so the Iranians are, substantially reinforcing the coastal defense. And so I do think that's, going to be a challenge both for Iran and us, really, because we haven't fought a coastal firefight since World War II, really. I mean, maybe a little bit in Korea, but like at this scale, really since World War II. And I don't think the Iranians are some kind of superstar at this point in attacking U.S. naval vessels in the Gulf. So I think it could be really kind of a Keystone Cop situation, and we both basically decide not to engage in a coastal Iranian and Gulf fight. And you see it now, because I think the Navy has made a choice, which is we're not going to get ourselves trapped inside the Gulf, right? That if there is a risk to our naval assets, it's being in the Gulf. Right. And so that's why we're outside the Gulf, really. And I think I would be shocked if we put a large surface strike group in like DESCON like one of the destroyer, strike groups.
Yeah.
If we put any like DESCON 22 or DESCON 2 or both into the Gulf, I'd be shocked. Right? We're not gonna put a dozen Arleigh Burks into the Gulf and and play a game in there against the Iranian Coastal Defense Force. And I don't know what that even serves really, because we can blockade as long as we want, and the Iranians can do a toll blockade. Like this is like a weird kind of double blockade, which and I think that's and I know Ken, I know you want some kind of like magic solution of victory here, but like that's long gone. And I think at this point, de-escalation is going to be the best win that you're going to get at this point, from both parties, because the U.S. can't afford to. I know you're okay sacrificing, Navy men on a destroyer. I'm not for a fool's errand here. And that's my problem with, I'd argue this new version of neocons is your guys are all willing to trade other people's kids for some kind of, uh, victory that I just that isn't even defined. There's not even objectives here defined. I mean, what's the objectives? You can't even name it's been 2 months. Can you name the objectives? You can't.
Yeah. Aaron, one thing I want to add
Yep.
that in listening to you talk is that, I like, for example, with Sal, I tried to get Sal on, but, he's too busy doing bigger and better things right now. But
Nothing's bigger and better than your calls, Jim.
Yeah, you're damn right. And so, he's, but do pay attention to what Sal's saying because he's really doing the best.
Oh, I listened to Sal's stuff. I listened to his stuff way before the Iran thing was going on.
Yeah, we actually had him talk about the canal tanker stuck a long time ago. But anyway, I'll eventually get to him because, he's right now, he's obviously luxuriating because he is a naval historian.
Yep.
He's having a lot of fun with this. But one thing I did think about in all this was, the operations that were launched in relationship to Ernest Will in 1987, 1988.
Yep.
And they put in Operation Praying Mantis. They put those two, basically they based SEAL platoons and Marines on those drill platforms.
Yep.
And they operated like the Riverine forces in the Delta during the Vietnam War in the 9th Division. And now, is that going to be, again, how's that relate to the Ayatollah toll?
Yeah.
Where these guys are, going along over to Iraq and Qasem Island and, doing their little payment to the Iranian government. And then, of course, the Americans are basically saying, fuck you. We're not letting anybody out who's associated with the Iranian ability to earn foreign exchange. So, what's unclear to me is in this new situation, how you militarily, I mean, again, it's in Trump's self-interest to come to a bargaining table deal as fast as possible on this situation. Because if it just continues, he knows he's losing. It's fragmenting his support, causing all these global economic problems. But at the same time, he's caught in a conundrum. I think the Iranians, of course, realize that is something that, it's sort of interesting. It's to their advantage to maybe play chicken with him a little longer, even though the problem is that if he unleashes the air power, then he's going to sit there and hurt them substantially. On the other hand, that's where you're going to see the drive to retaliate. And Trump's been very lucky right now with the market and with the oil prices.
He's one last quick point because I know Mike and Julian have their hands up, but I actually believe, and I'd be interested to hear Julian on this too, is I think Iran's strongest position was about 4 weeks ago when they initialized their Gulf strikes that no one was expecting. That was the moment they should have really cut their deal. Like that was the peak moment of leverage. And and I think they probably could have gotten the best deal they could get at that point. I mean, I'm not saying they can't get another good deal, but you're taking more, like as Julian said, you're taking more risk as you stretch the timeline on. So I think there's also a risk here that both sides grossly overplay their hands, and that we go through basically kind of a degrading cycle. And then that can lead to sort of a the old adage, escalate to de-escalate, right? You could get into some dumb cycle there, which generally has terrible return on investment. So I think almost both sides, somebody has to squeeze them together. And I think China is the only state that can do this at this point, that says, look, like, you ain't getting anything more out of this. And everybody else is hurting in between. I mean, right now, my customers, aluminum prices are through the roof. I have a lot of auto manufacturers I work with, and assemblers and aerospace, pre-assembly companies, and it's absolute chaos in the in any of the energy based markets that are direct or intermediate goods are just getting blasted right now.
Yeah, well, look at the fertilizer shit. I mean, that's like, Kenny, you take over right now. I got to deal with Gail. Go on, Mike.
Well,
I'm I unmuted. Okay. So yeah, I mentioned that before earlier.
Hold on, Ken. Mike had his hand up. He had his hand up.
Ken, hold it. He said, "Go on, Mike." Your name is.
No, he said, "Go on, Ken."
No, he said Mike. He said Mike.
Oh, go on, Mike. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I missed.
If you change your name, Ken, then that's another matter. First of all,
I've changed it so many times that the police are catching up with me. Go ahead.
I know. Well, you're from LA. The idea is that.
So am I. Don't make fun of LA.
What? Why not? Everybody else.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
I know the idea of Trump, of this going on too long, it's not going to happen. First of all, the midterms are coming up. He's not going to let this. He's not going to let this linger, even on the approach to the midterms. What he's going to do is that he's going to, what it looks like, Iran's not going to come to the table, not going to negotiate or whatever, and then he's going to say, unleash all hell or whatever, air power, mainly air power, missile strikes, air power, etc. Bomb the shit out of them, do as much damage as possible, and then say, okay, all right, they didn't succumb to our wishes, so we bombed the shit out of them. Okay, we're going home. That's well, it's a possible scenario. Who comes out of that? I mean, Iran won't be destroyed, but they're going to come out weaker, and this isn't good for Iran. As for the United States, well, under Trump, I don't know what is good for the United States, but the fact is that I think that's what Trump's going to do. He's just going to unleash all hell. Either he's going to get concessions from the Iranians, which they're not even coming to the negotiating table at this point, or he's going to unleash bloody hell over Iran, do a lot of destruction, and then declare victory and go home. Mission accomplished.
Yeah.
And the idea is that then things will settle down, and it's beginning to look like Israel was just using this as a cover to go after Hezbollah, but I don't know. Whatever happens there will happen, and things will settle down. Then you have the midterms, and if the midterms go against Trump, all the better. If they don't, they'll just start something else.
Yep, very good. Absolutely correct.
Thank
I'll
you.
Put your money on that, Mike. Absolutely. What will be, will be.
Better things to bet on. Yeah.
That's right. But I just want to correct one thing with Aaron. I don't intend that we go to pull all plugs and go and just destroy everything, or go in absolute war or even like Korea. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that part of evaluation of a military situation is all scenarios, not just
Yeah, but no, but
not
but
just
Ken,
a diplomatic solution.
no, but Ken, I don't think you understand that in every command region, what used to be called the sinks, we have what are called OPLANs, OPLAN, and these are all contingencies that are already been scenarioed, simulated. They're leveled. They've already been resourced, and these are ready off the shelf. There's planning leaders, typically an 06, a captain or a colonel that's responsible in each of those commands who maintains that continuity, and then they have a peer officer back at the Pentagon, and they're running on an annualized basis. They're basically running red teaming of various scenarios, all the time. And so these are the workups that our leaders chose not to leverage in this conflict. So these are think of these as the tools in the toolbox. So that's I view that.
So you're saying that the government already rejected that concept because
it's obvious
they would always consider it.
Well, no, it's obvious that we did because of how we prosecuted the last 2 months of the conflict, because there's no plan.
Okay, but I'm just saying, my question was, okay, well, you don't know what the plan was. I'm just asking, what do you think it would have been?
The plan wouldn't be this. The plan. Look, I participated as a.
No, I mean, what would have been the total?
Hold on, Ken, hold on. So as a soldier, when I was active duty in the Army, and I was in the Guard and active duty for 15 years total. So when I was in the active duty, it was part of the first Gulf War, and I was in an armored cav regiment, and that was the first Gulf War was an updated Oplan 1025 for Iraq, for the Iraq contingency of an Iraq invasion of one of its neighbors, which in that case happened to be Kuwait, but it could have been Saudi Arabia or Jordan or somebody else. And so this contingency life cycle, right, like a planning process, right, has been continuous going back really since the late 70s. I mean, yeah, since post Vietnam, so for almost 50 years. And so we've had.
I understand that you were responsible. They figured all contingencies. I got that.
No, I wasn't responsible for it. I was
not you, whoever. The government is responsible.
There are people
just like the CIA. They figure out all alternatives.
No, it's not like the CIA. No.
That's not how it works.
Ken, it's not the CIA. Like this is like a job.
Yeah, it's
that
a job.
exists in every command, and there's a group of people very, very similar to the work that Julian and Alex and others do when you do all your wargaming and stuff. And imagine if all you guys that do that are majors and lieutenant colonels and colonels, sergeant majors, chief warrants, and you guys are all specialists in doing this, and there's specialized.
Okay. So you're saying that the government already considered that, and they're obviously not doing it. I got that.
That's right.
So I'm just curious, what was the option that they would have come up with?
Well,
to go full
force?
Look,
if you're invading, if you're going to attack Iran at a large scale level, which the combined attacks between the U.S. and the Israelis were at least 25,000 strikes, so it was pretty substantial. Then you'd have to plan the contingencies around the Persian Gulf. Those are pretty obvious, which we didn't. And if you look at what the naval requirements for that are, what the air defense requirements, the land-based air defense, and how to extend that into the Aegis air defense, which is the naval air defense. So basically, like, think of it as like the Iron Dome that you have in Israel. You would be creating kind of a Costco edition of an Iron Dome in the Gulf. So you'd have to get all those forces and all that material there, and you'd have to get all the strike aircraft, because as soon as something launched, you would obviously be knocking it down with we'll call it the Gulf Dome, and then you'd be returning fire and strikes immediately wherever it was launched. So you would create this, and of course that takes months. Everything I just described takes months. You're not doing that in days or even weeks. It's months. And the thesis to this whole concept of operations, that's what all this stuff is called, right? It's you know, the CO, you know, the either the CTO or the C2O, is that Israel was going to launch this against the leadership, kind of a decapitation, and they wanted to maintain surprise. And so they bet the farm on surprise, very similar to how the Russians bet the farm on surprise of operations. And the history of surprise of operations against medium or large states is pretty bad. Like, just historically, I'm sure Julian can confirm this, you know, like empirically. But, you know, you're not, I mean, it's not Venezuela, right? It's a, you know, you're talking about a substantially large, you know, state actor. And that's basically, you know, your the ability to just knock them out at the state level with, you know, a few thousand strikes is kind of absurd when you're talking about a country with almost 100 million people, the size
Okay,
of,
so is that concluding that they
yeah.
followed the wrong plan, or they were presented with the wrong plan?
Well, no, they were presented, I'm sure, with the right plan, but they rejected it because they believed in Israel's concept of operations, and they probably believed in their own version of that also, like their own version, which I'm sure the Air Force sold them on also. And that's all the Air Force, that's all the Israelis could do, is an Air Force operation, right? The Israelis are not a naval or expeditionary power. So this is the heart of the issue. Like, when you really strip it back, is that for Israel to strike Iran, really all they could do is special operations, Mossad type actions, and airstrikes and some ballistic strikes. That's all they have. Like, that's their capability. They don't have a fleet, and they don't have large
Okay. So
expeditionary forces.
okay. Somebody, probably his name is Trump. He bought something. He bought some hype.
Well, not just him. I mean, remember, when something screws up this big, it's never one human being, right? Like, it's easy to blame Iraq, OIF 1, 2, and 3 on Rumsfeld, right? But it's never that simple, right? It's always a collection of you know, many people involved, you know, up and down the food chain.
Okay, that's
And
fine.
other people who had other opinions are cast aside, typically, and there you go.
All right. Okay. Well, that's it. We're going to keep our legs crossed and our fingers crossed and everything. I think it's about 11 o'clock on the East Coast. 11:30.
11:30, Ken.
So let's call it a day. But I have to
Well,
talk
wait,
to Mike.
Julian, I think.
Oh, Julian,
needs
go
to
ahead,
go.
Julian. Wrap it up.
All right, I'll make it super brief. I gotta say, I really find the conjectures super interesting. I agree with Mike. I mean, I would predict one last swing at the bat, a large-scale attack against Iran. It'll probably be justified, and I know, and I would bet the Israelis are not going to participate. It'll be the Americans justifying the damage to nuclear infrastructure. So I think that's a pretty solid prediction. I'm interested, you know, just going in reverse order by the conjecture that Aaron had about multiple people screwing up. And I'm thinking of, you know, obviously past operations where people deluded themselves, and, you know, the institutions, some people in the institutions of government knew what was going on. Ward Carroll is one of the guys on YouTube that's very popular among Air Force types. And this guy was super enthusiastic about the Air Force. And he said in one of his sort of giddy presentations that, you know, I wish I was there. You know, he's a guy who's probably older than me, and he's an F-14. But I believe he was the guy in the back operating the radar or whatever in the F-14. So I definitely detect some Air Force hubris. But for Trump, I mean, there's that. I don't like The Simpsons. I know, you know, if I watched anything, it's going to be South Park. But there's an episode in Simpsons where the whole episode is his hand stuck in a vending machine, and at the end you realize he was always free. He just wouldn't let go of this can that's in the machine. And you know, what strikes me is Trump's instinct, which is he'd rather be associated with Israel in taking this anti-Iran position than going multilateral. I mean, something I mentioned earlier on before most of you showed up with Jim was that if Trump had, even as Trump, gone to the European capitals and Japan and then India and said, listen, we got to do this, then Iran, it might have ignored and not done anything, or sorry, it might not have been severely affected by bombing, but Iran will not close the straits, even if, in my view, weak democracies get together. Because so much of Iran's economy is based upon circumventing the sanctions to which they're enabled by various European banking entities. I mean, those entities have a big presence in Iran and allow the people that live there to interact with their relatives across the planet. So just a couple of other thoughts. When I think of, at least in political science, we generally think of countries as having the highest probability of violence when they're in the post-authoritarian early process of modernization. And countries I put there are Russia. And bizarrely, I think India is sort of on the cusp. Iran, we're never going to get as peaceful a China as today. Once China democratizes and you have actors that can follow nationalism, I think China will get much more aggressive. It's one of the reasons I'm afraid of a Kuomintang China. Iran, I think, is the same thing. I mean, right now you have an authoritarian regime that spends most of its time conspiring against its own population. Once the clerics are gone, I could see more violence in Iran. That's just me, answering the question of what's going to happen in the long term. I think post-Trump, I don't mean post-November elections, but post-Trump, I think the new president is going to travel to the capitals of Europe, and then Iran will withdraw from the Straits. I think it's going to happen seamlessly, and I think they're going to get. I'm not sure what they're going to get. They're not going to get reparations. I think they're just going to pull back unilaterally. That's it. I think this is a unique moment where Trump has maneuvered the U.S. into the weakest possible position, and the Iranians are basically going to town on it. I think with the passage of time, we're going to have more instances where the U.S. is going to have to choose to interdict or not interdict Indian and Chinese oil tankers. And I think after a while, the only countries getting picked on are small ones by the U.S. And I think one of the things the Iranians are going to think more and more about as they become less politically and culturally autistic is looking at how they could weaken the Gulf Emirates. So I'm not sure. I guess Aaron and I would have to talk about this more. I mean, Aaron identified the high point 4 weeks ago. I'm not sure. I mean, my sense at the time was, holy cow, the Americans are bold. And I actually thought Iran's ceasefire from the outside looked like they did it in part because of Trump's threat to nuke them, or to look like he's going to nuke them. So one last observation. My impression is that Trump's increasing reluctance to use the military is actually coming from congressional pressure, where they've let it be known that he cannot break the toys he has, because the way he's behaving is unnaturally restrained. And I think he was given a run, but I think there's a critical mass of Democrats and more when I mean conservative, I mean non-MAGA Republicans that have said, listen, we don't like Iran, but you've got to be more rational in your application of force. I'm not sure if any of that really addressed much, but I got to say that some of the conjectures here were sort of fascinating. Mike's and Aaron's, that's stuff that, I think we should have started with that at the beginning of the meeting. Thank you.
And Mike still has his hand up. Can you let him go, Ken?
Yeah, I have a good way of closing out. I agree with Julian because he agreed with me. And I only have my hand up because I forgot to take it down. So we can end now. No.
Well, actually, one other quick point I wanted to make.
I knew you were going to do that, Aaron.
Yes, I know. But this is about Alex. So Alex, it's not a diss or anything. It's just a point. So no, people talk about the precision munitions, which are obviously the upper echelon. But on all of our surface warfare platforms, the Mark 45 guns, which are 127 millimeter standard. This is our standard 54 caliber 5-inch gun. They use a hyper velocity projectile. It's called an HVP, and it has a range of basically 12 to 35 miles, and it acts as a very low cost missile interceptor. I'd encourage you to just drill into the HVP rounds, because they and all of our destroyers and frigates have them. So it's actually, I think, the least appreciated. Like, we kind of have over indexed to precision weapons because of I think the Ukrainian war. But when it comes to our naval capacity, right, across all of our platforms, we have a tremendous amount of low cost, Mark 45s on all of our destroyers and frigates, and that provides a tremendous amount of anti-coastal fires, and also low cost interceptors, because they're all tied into the Aegis system. So it isn't just about firing the precision munitions. It's sort of underappreciated, but at the surface warfare level, my cousin is a retired Navy captain, and he was a surface warfare commander in his last decade, and so he did 25 years in the Navy. For 25 years in the Navy, then he did 20 years in the civilian side, supporting the Navy. But anyways, and I didn't really even think through all these till he told me about these, last couple of months, a lot more about them, and just how that's sort of what you lead with, is that because you're able to determine, out to 20, 30 miles, if you can create the interception, and if you can't, after you have like these salvos, then you could fire your any of your ballistic interceptors for the last 5-10 miles, and then you have your all your Sea Whiz guns that can kind of be your last. So it's like a 3-layer defense. He showed it to me, like a 3-layer defense cone. It makes sense, actually, like at a practical level. Ken, you're muted. You're muted.
Play
Ken.
harpoon.
Oh, yes, Julian. Yes. Ken, you're still muted. Ken, you're muted.
Well, you should thank me for that.
Yeah. Who wants to hear Ken Aaron talk?
I don't want to hear it.
Including his wife.
People attempting to talk on mute.
Now we're all ready for the final on destructive.
Speaking of Ken, weren't you coming to town at some point soon?
I want to hear Ken Aaron talk, because I want to hear him say 2 words.
Oh yeah, that's it. We're ending off. I wanted to talk to you about Mike.
Are you coming to the city at some point soon, or
no? It's gonna circumstance be the end of May.
No,
because there's some things that have, some good things, some bad things, whatever.
Okay.
I just hold everything up till May. We'll be there, and then we're never leaving. We're going to stay there until the whole city melts to the ground.
Which won't take long with climate change. Come on.
Yeah, climate change and
I will say one thing. I just Well,
go ahead. I wanted to tell you something privately, but I'll tell everybody. Go ahead.
Why don't you come off YouTube here, Ken, so it's not being recorded on YouTube?
I just got back from Winnipeg, and on the day I flew back,
Go Jets.
It was snowing in Winnipeg, and then when I got to New York, it was 80 degrees. So the climate hasn't changed that much. I just wanted to say that.
Go Jets.
Yes.
Okay. So here's the story, Mike. I sent you an email about a video from a thing called Golden Glamour Files. That's the YouTube channel, Golden Glamour Files. And he did an explanation about all of the bumps and grinds and mistakes on Jaws. and how it didn't happen, and this and that, and how this guy got whatever. Incredible, incredible.
So by the
thing.
way, the next time you're in LA, Mike, so because I got back I was out there for about a month and went to the motion picture, the Academy Awards motion picture museum, which is one of my favorite museums right next to LACMA, and they
Oh,
have fantastic Jaws installation. It includes hundreds of artifacts from the making of the movie.
yeah.
You know,
Well, you too. Watch this Golden Glamour Files on
what
Jaws,
I'm telling
and
you,
then
Ken,
the
what I'm
show.
telling you, Ken, is go to the Academy
Yeah, yeah, I know. It's up there,
Museum.
Beverly Hills, right?
I know you know it is. I'm just telling you right now, they have a Jaws
Yeah,
installation. That's the main one they have. They have probably close to 500 real pieces of, so the actual shot, you know, like in the boat the fishing boat, they have Shaw's actual a dining room from the movie. They have all of the different
yeah.
equipment, and they also have all of the stuff that people were wearing and using. They have the
I know, I understand, but I'm not in worship of the film. But this is an analysis of the movie industry mostly, and the
okay.
personnel's involved, which was Scheinberg, Lucas, and Scheinberg, right? Is that his name? You know, the guy who
Spielberg.
Spielberg. How can
Spielberg,
you sit around?
Spielberg, Scheinberg, same thing. Iceberg, you know,
Well,
you know that joke, right?
let me just say one thing.
Yeah,
Since
go
you
ahead.
directed this towards me, I think Jaws was vastly overrated, and I think Spielberg is vastly overrated.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
I radically disagree with you, and I think it's all
You can
age based. And I think if
no,
you
no, no, no.
experience,
It's
hold
art.
on, Mike. If you
It's
experience,
art based.
no, hold on, let me explain this. If you experience Jaws and Close Encounters and ET as a kid, like I did,
yeah,
then that experience is seminal. And you had your movies that you experienced when you were young that are absolutely seminal. And so you can have a meta analysis, but you can't. I mean, ultimately, film is art, and art is expression and feelings, right? We can't just, we're not applying like an analytic matrix to it, because if we are, well, then
Don't get
we'll
into the
show it's art.
definition of art with me, because I'm telling you, art is more than that.
I didn't
Just
say it's
people
not more than that
expressing
either. I'm pointing out that if you are of a certain age from the mid 70s on, and you and all you guys older than that can hate all that, and we don't care because you'll die before us, so it won't matter. And then we'll die before
we'll see who dies first. We'll see.
and then we'll die before the younger people, and they'll have their answers that, things we didn't like, etc., or whatever, or we
Yeah,
became farts about. But if you experienced those Spielberg movies from the mid 70s to basically the mid 80s, they're really fundamentally seminal in your youth experience. And now if you experience them as adults, I'm sure it's totally different, right? And because it was, I mean, I could see it being
Okay, I got it. Okay, doctor, listen. Here's the thing. Just watch these little episodes on Jaws and Taxi Driver. There's so much information in this.
Sure.
The guy put together beautiful
That's
production of a video going
I will do
over
that. I will absolutely
the ups and downs of the production.
Sure.
You
Let
know,
me just,
the ups and
yeah, let
downs
me
of the
just say-
production. 200 people auditioned for the part of, I think the girl's name is Wendy, the taxi driver's girlfriend, not
Sybil
Jodie
Shepherd? You mean
Foster,
Sybil
not the
Shepherd?
Jodie Foster part, the other girl.
You mean Sybil Shepherd?
Sybil Shepherd part, including Helen, not Helen Mirren. Who's the number one actress in America?
Meryl Streep?
Meryl Streep. She auditioned everywhere. 200 people.
Yeah.
So it's a documentation to me of all of the problems on production that they run into, all kinds of things, and it's really that you don't usually hear about. I couldn't believe it. It's in just to give you a little bit of a flash. What's the guy's
I'm going to
name?
give
What's the
something to
director's
Julian.
name? The director's name is
Steven Spielberg.
Spielberg. Okay, and he was best friends with George Lucas.
Yes, he
And
was.
one day they were cooling around, and Lucas got stuck in the jaws, in the mechanical thing, and they had to send a technician up to open it up because he was.
So I'm going to give something to Julian, a cool documentary you might like if you have Prime. It's called Handle with Care.
Yeah.
And what it is, it's the legend of Nautic Streetball Crew, which is a Canadian street basketball kind of phenomenon in the late 90s and 2000s. And it's pretty cool. I think you really will like it because it's, it gives a different vibe to Canadian culture, which, we tend not to have because we have all these kind of Schitt's Creek type TV shows, which are fine. But, this is much more of like Canada and hood and kind of that subculture that Canadians kind of don't really talk about outside of Canada, and most people don't know about. It's really cool, actually.
Hey, Julian,
Actually,
you're in Toronto,
let me
right?
just say one thing because
Thanks, Aaron.
Are you in Toronto?
Let me just say that Canada's a big country with a lot of people.
Yes, it is. 41 million.
Therefore, there's a lot going on there, and that Americans don't know about, and who cares about Americans? But anyway, let me just say one thing about you're talking about seminal films and when you were a kid, okay? When you're a kid, there's all time. I mean, when I was 7 years old, one of my favorite films was Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. It is not art, okay? Just because it was seminal to you as a kid or to a whole generation of kids doesn't make it art. And that's why we grow up and we learn about things, what is truly artistic, what is more universal, what has more depth, what speaks to the nature of these profound ideas. And that's why we determine as adults what is art, not as kids. And that's why
I would argue that Jaws is art because when you look at everything about it, not just the movie, you look at the posters, the whole approach to how Jaws, after 50 years, has built a relationship to the ocean.
That's not art. That's not art. You're not discussing art. You're discussing sociology, really. It's not art.
Okay. So art's separate from sociology always is what you're saying.
No, that's funny. I didn't hear myself say that.
Okay, but I mean, if you're making that distinction,
I'm saying that is sociology and not art. Doesn't mean that art and sociology can't.
So you're telling me that the Jaws, that the Roger Castle posters, who basically you could argue those movie posters are the most recognizable, famous ones in cinematic history.
Recognizable doesn't make it art either. And you're not going to put it this way. If you take Tennessee Williams or Chekhov or Shakespeare and mention them in the same sentence as Jaws, a true artist is going to laugh at you. Okay? If you take any film that you would consider art, like the original West Side Story, as opposed to the Steven Spielberg disaster's attempt to remake it, or Orson Welles films or something, and compare. Steven Spielberg is a technician. I don't think he's an artist. He's a technician.
So let me ask you this. So do you consider pop art art?
Pop art can be considered art.
I would say Jaws is absolutely pop art.
No, it isn't, because you're comparing Jaws to Andy Warhol or something.
No. You're picking. You're doing Mott and Bailey.
No. But what you're doing is you're you're blurring the lines. You're attempting to
Because the
blur
lines are blurred. You just don't like that they are.
No. What I'm trying to say is maybe at the actual seam there's a little blurring, but not when you get into the pith of it, into the center of it, into the core of it. So the fact of the matter is, you can say that.
So you're telling me John Williams' score for Jaws, one of the great movie scores in history, my favorite individual that's ever scored movies is Ennio Morricone, and John Williams is right there with him. Are you saying those aren't artists? Those aren't musical artists?
No, I'm not saying that. A film that is not art can have artistic elements, but the film itself is an art.
Okay, I mean,
so the idea is I can sit there and say, I mean, there's a score to a movie called Prince Valiant. The score was done by Franz Waxman, it's a terrific score, but the film is an art. It's a comic strip. And the fact of the matter is, and actually comic strips can have artistic elements also, but the film is not art, but there can be artistic. I mean, Aaron Copland's score to the North Star isn't a work of art, but Aaron Copland's score can be. So you can have artistic elements in a film that is not in itself a work of art. Which you can have, you could see a performance of a play that's a piece of garbage and it has a great performance. It doesn't mean the play is great, but it means the performance was. You have to.
Okay, so what you're saying is Robert Shaw's acting could be art. John Williams's score can be art. The visual cinematography, all this scaffolding could be art, but it's really not art. And I mean, that's fair. That's your opinion, but I don't think that would be mainstream opinion about art in Jaws. I mean, I'm just being objective.
Well, mainstream, to be quite honest, as my acting teacher, Stella Adler, used to say, there is no democracy in the theater. You don't vote on what's art. Okay? You don't, it's not what's popular. Popular is something else. But what's
I'm not
art,
arguing that. I mean, so look, at the end of the day, we're never going to agree that Jaws is art. I believe it's art because of how seminal it was and how
it affected you.
No. Hold on. I'm separating that. I'm not just talking about me anymore. Right. So so I'm separating those two things. So at the end of the day, you have the relationship of everything that was produced as part of Jaws, and the fact that the Motion Picture Museum of Art has it has its most exhaustive installation being Jaws, and which is phenomenal. I mean, it was a phenomenon. If you get to LA, the next time you're in LA, if you go see it, I mean, I know you don't like Jaws, or you think it's overrated.
I didn't say I didn't like it.
You think it's overrated, Mike, but the point is that I would argue that Jaws is extremely unique as a movie in the last 50 years of cinema. You might not, but I think that's where we'll have a difference of opinion. And that isn't just me reflecting how it felt when I was young. It's what it still does, right? I mean,
if it has an effect on you, that has worth in itself. Doesn't make it
I'm
art.
separating that though, Mike. You're still layering on that. I'm moved on that. I shouldn't have even said that because now that you're weaponizing that, I'm just pointing out that at the end of the day, Jaws by itself, I think in almost as it maintains its currency and all of the effects that it has, which is everything combined from the staging of it, the acting in it, the music, the relationship of the cast to the scene. I mean, it evokes a modern Moby Dick. And I think if you don't consider Moby Dick art, that's fine.
I
would,
do, but I don't consider evoking Moby Dick as necessarily art. Let's put it this way: Robert Shaw, who was a great actor, um, and probably would have even gotten further, lived longer if he didn't drink so much.
that's true.
Robert Shaw used to walk along, and people that I knew would stop him on the street, and the first thing he would say is, "I don't want to talk about Jaws. I don't want to talk about Jaws." But if you asked him about his play that he wrote, The Man in the Glass Booth, or you want to just talk about theater in general, or some great playwright, or some film that he did in his earlier days, films that he did that weren't necessarily popular, but that were done artistically, he would talk about them. So Robert Shaw, as an artist, just because you're an art, I mean, in other words, actors have to do, more often than not, we don't get to do truly artistic work. We
Right.
have to make money, we have to make a living.
Sure.
But the fact of the matter is, and that's probably why Shaw did it, it doesn't mean you don't do good work in it. You go there and you say,
Yeah,
I'm
but
gonna
Jaws. Let's be very clear. Jaws was not this massive, expensive production. So at the end of the day, you know, it was much more of like a play, really, in some ways, that was outdoors.
Look, I gotta interrupt. Look, it's all personal stuff. Obviously, Aaron Reyes likes Jaws the way Mike Jankowitz likes the original West Side Story. It's an
Which I love the
epitome.
West Side Story, and by the way,
Yeah,
I think the West Side Story is art, and
great.
it
That's fine.
it
That's
is,
good.
and
I
there are
guys,
reasons. There are reasons for it.
watch this YouTube channel, Golden Glamour Files, and watch it at least on Jaws and the Taxi Driver and other things.
Yep.
It's just gossip about Hollywood, but it's very intriguing and very interesting. And that's what I'm saying is really good content. It's it moves along. It's fast. It's not trivial. It's not trying to be cute. It's just good, hard-hitting material. Can we cut it out and go on to the rest of our lives now, guys? Come on.
absolutely.
Okay, we'll get together. Hey, by the way, well, I'm going to go to New York. So, just a fast question: are you in Toronto or Vancouver, Julian?
He's in
Montreal.
Montreal.
5 hours north of New York.
Oh, you're in Toronto. Okay.
No, Montreal. He
Oh,
said
Montreal. Right. I may be up there
I
soon.
live in a French Canadian province.
Okay. Yeah.
It's called
So,
Quebec,
okay, that's fine.
part of
So,
Canada.
okay, so I'm gonna get going. We're
Which
going.
has
Good
the
night.
population of California, 41 million.
Oh, I was gonna say, Aaron, please, next time you're in LA and I'm here, please give me a
Well,
call.
I live right outside of New York, so that's where I live. So,
Okay, I'll come visit you there in New Jersey. I'm gonna be in New Jersey.
well, no, I'll meet you in New York. I'm 15 minutes from New York City. So,
Oh, okay. Well,
He doesn't
watch
want to meet
out.
you in New Jersey.
That's the first target that they're gonna hit with.
what'd
an
you say,
AK.
Mike?
I said he doesn't want to meet you in New Jersey.
No,
Sure, he
I'll
does.
meet
New
you.
Jersey's phenomenal.
Yeah, New Jersey is phenomenal. Yeah. Okay, but I'm just
Okay, guys, that's it. Let's not start our discussion number 7. Okay, hey, thank you for it. It's a nice, chatty meeting we had. It's all very good. Let's hope that everybody wins at all conflicts and everything turns over and it's good and we all start swinging. And
Well, no, remember, everyone can't win. So,
well, everybody, I tell you, the main thing. I don't know if you guys heard about this. It was a recent thing from the John Hopkins Hospital, the big one.
yeah.
The major cause of death in the U.S. is being born. So that means we're all going to die one way or another. So, and that's where you get peace. There's very few people that are dead that continue to argue about things. You're just, you're done. That's
And
it.
there's also very few people that are dead that can still say they're really happy to be alive. So,
I don't
at
know.
that point.
The ones I know, they're happy. Okay. All right, I'm going to go. You were watching
Arrivederci.
going viral on the 22nd of April 2025. Good night. Be
Good night.
curious. Try to think for yourself. Forget what other people try to get you to think. Think for yourself.
Go Jaws.
Okay,
Swing
go
vote, yeah.
Jaws. Bye bye.
Bye.
Go, go.